Chapter 936. Trouble had finally arrived. Xi Xiecheng was very depressed and angry. This was because she knew that Chu Yang's matter was very important. So, she covered her face. This was the only time she covered her face along the way. She didn't want to cause any trouble. But trouble came looking for her. She was actually chased all the way to the inn with her face covered. This showed how desperate this bunch of playboys were in their pursuit of beauty. "Big brother, is it really a crime for a woman to be beautiful?" Chu Lur asked puzzledly. "Will there be so much trouble just because she's beautiful? In that case, are beautiful women destined to be unhappy in their lives?" Chu Yang heaved a deep sigh. He didn't know how to answer his sister's question. Beauty. This kind of situation was not common in the lower three heavens. Even if there was, it was rarely so blatant. In the upper three heavens, although the situation had worsened, it wasn't very chaotic. But in the upper three heavens, everyone was so unscrupulous. He had only walked 1,800 miles and he had already killed more than 100 of such people, including their followers. And this was in a place where there weren't many people. This showed how bad the moral situation in the upper three heavens had become. "Beauty is not a crime, but it's also a crime," Chu Yang sighed. "Born in a peaceful era, beauty is a fortune bestowed by the heavens. Born in a chaotic era, beauty is a punishment bestowed by the heavens. No matter how good a person's character is, he can't protect his beautiful wife in this heavens. That's why it's said that beautiful women are ill-fated. Actually, it's not that beautiful women are ill-fated, but plebeians who deserve to die." After Chu Yang finished, he looked at the door. The three of them were staying in the heavenly room number 1 and room number 2. Generally, those who could stay here were people of status. The Zhuge clan had arranged for them to stay here, which was tantamount to saying, "These three people have a strong background, don't provoke them." Such an obvious hint, but these playboys didn't take it seriously at all. With a loud bang, the door was pushed open. A group of young men appeared at the door. They were all dressed in rich and dignified clothes, but their eyes were full of eagerness and lust as they looked at the room. The moment they saw Xi Xiecheng, they were all stunned. Xi Xiecheng was in the room and was not wearing a mask. She was barefaced at this moment, but her peerless beauty was fully displayed. Even though he was looking at them coldly at this moment, it still made these young men's hearts itch. "Ice beauty, ha! I love climbing ice mountains the most." Sun Tsunzhang's right cheek had a big mole, and he was laughing weirdly at the moment. Looking at Xi Xiecheng, he almost drooled. The other person looked similar to Sun Quanzhang, but he had a big mole on the left side of his face. "He must be the Grand Gangang, Sun Duanmo." "Beauty, what's your name?" "Ioyo." "Don't glare at me. Once you glare at me, I, your lover, feel weak all over." Sun Quanzhang leaned against the door frame and acted like a rascal. The group of playboys behind him jeered. "Second young master, have you gone soft? If even the bottom part is soft, that would be bad. Let us enjoy the beauty." That's right, that's right. Second young master, quickly reach out and touch it. Can you still use it?" Wahahaha. After a burst of weird laughter, Sun Quanzhang actually reached out and touched it. He turned his head and laughed. "The other parts of my body are all soft, only this part is harder." Instantly, the evil laughter shook the sky. Everyone looked at Chu Yang and the other two in the room as if they were looking at delicious food. It seemed that the people inside could not resist at all. Everything was in the bag and destined. "Second young master, why don't you let the beauty touch you?" A playboy laughed loudly. "Second brother, why don't I do it?" Sun Duanma was a little anxious. "I've never seen such a fairy-like beauty in my whole life, that won't do. She's mine, so she's mine. Even if you're my elder brother, I won't let you." Sun Quanzhang was very determined. Chu Zhang coughed and said slowly, "People from the Sun clan? Ah, this gigolo can even talk." Sun Duanma chuckled and swaggered in. He clicked his tongue and said, "A big beauty and a little beauty. This time, we're really lucky. Quanzhang, how about this? You want the big one and I want the little one." Sun Qinzhang looked at Chu Lur with some reluctance and said painfully, "Okay." Black gas loomed between Chu Yang's eyebrows. His murderous intent could no longer be contained. He forcibly suppressed it and said, "Will the Sun clan allow you to do this? Don't the elders in your clan know that this is not good?" When he said this, Zi Xiecheng immediately knew that Chu Yang already had the intention of exterminating the clan. And the answer of these two brothers would be the answer. It would determine the fate of their clan. "Clan? Stop us?" Sun Duanma laughed loudly. "It's not the first time we've done such things. Gigolo, do you think that if the clan had stopped us, we would be standing here today?" Sun Duanma laughed strangely. "Little one, do you think this world is so peaceful? You actually swaggered into our Sun clan's territory. You shouldn't have brought along a beauty. Haha, but it's good too. It's good too. I'll take it that you've brought me a beauty. If you know what's good for you, I'll spare your life." Chu Yang smiled faintly. Yes, the Sun clan was confirmed. Seeing that the Sun brothers were about to make a move, Chu Yang shouted, "Wait! Wait!" Sun Qinzhang stopped and looked at Chu Yang. "Little one, your voice is not soft. How dare you be so loud? I just want to know how we got into such bad luck." Chu Yang put on a dejected look and said, "When we came here, we immediately checked into the inn and didn't meet you. But now you've come to find trouble with us directly. Could it be that you've seen it?" All the more he couldn't let go of the person who tipped them off. These people clearly knew that he couldn't afford to offend them, but they went to inform the young ruffians. Even if he didn't do it himself, he still wanted to defile them. What kind of mentality was this? Such people were even more abominable than the Sun brothers. Chu Yang didn't intend to let any of them off. To cut the weeds, he had to dig up the roots. Today, the king of Hell Chu intended to really start a massacre. Sun Duanma laughed loudly. "We didn't see it, but they saw it, which is equivalent to us seeing it." As he said, he waved his hand arrogantly. "Did you see it? A few of them saw it. So that you can know that we have a big clan and 4 small clans here. They are like stars surrounding the moon. Do you know which big clan is that? Sun clan?" Chu Yang frowned and asked. "Smart." Sun Qinzhang snapped his fingers. "And the few of them are Eunuch Li, Eunuch Zhao, Eunuch Qian and Eunuch Jing. We brothers have always enjoyed blessings and will together. When they found the beauty, it was equivalent to me finding it immediately. It's that simple, understand? Ha! Do you think that I won't dare to touch you just because the warriors of the Zhuge clan brought you to stay in the inn and arranged for you to stay in the first room? What a joke! I see." Chu Yang stood up and said righteously, "So it's the 5 big clans that connive with the young ruffians of each clan to do whatever they want and wreak havoc in the village. I have to remove such a malignant tumor. Yeah. What an arrogant tone. You actually said I stand up?" Sun Duanma sneered and said, "So you also have some background?" Sun Qinzhang laughed and said, "We didn't do anything when we came up because we were trying to find out the background of this little guy. After being interrogated by him for such a long time, it's time for us to find out more about him. Haha, I'd like to see which clan's young master is actually so awesome." Chu Yang's eyes were filled with murderous intent. He threw a token on the table and said lightly, "I'm the chief doctor of the Southeast Law Enforcement Officers. You dare to touch me?" He only took it out now because he was sure that these people were already in a difficult position. No matter who he was, they had to touch him. And if they touched him now, it would be equivalent to making an enemy out of the law enforcement officers. He had to put on a big hat first. After all, this was the territory of the Zhuge clan, and he was alone. Not only did he have to stand on the right side of things, he also had to find a way out and a backer first. Otherwise, if the Zhuge clan made things difficult for him, although he wasn't afraid, it would also hinder his plan to participate in the medicine banquet. But something that Chu Yang didn't expect happened. Seeing an exquisite jade pendant on the table, Sun Duanma went forward and grabbed it. He looked closely at it and muttered, Cold heaven and earth in the southeast, I'm Mo Shaoran, the law enforcement officer of the human world. I'm righteous and fearless. I can face the heavens with this heart. After he finished reciting, Sun Duanma actually swayed his neck and clicked his tongue. Good poem! Good poem! This poem is really well written. When I recite it, I also feel a little passionate and heroic. I didn't expect you to have such talent. Even though Chu Yang was furious, he couldn't help but be stunned. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In this world, as the son and daughter of an aristocratic clan, there was actually such a fool. There was only one such law enforcement jade pendant in the entire heavens. It was the symbol of the law enforcement master who was in charge of the general direction. The cultivation of this law enforcement master wasn't necessarily the highest, but his reputation was awe-inspiring. Because he represented all the law enforcement officers in the world. As for the law enforcement officers' interrogation hall, secret hall, dragon hall, tiger hall, and so on, they all existed as a mobile force. Under normal circumstances, this law enforcement master would rule this heavens in an orderly manner. The identity cards of ordinary law enforcement officers were divided into iron, copper, silver, and gold. When the law enforcement officers reached a certain level, they would be divided into white, blue, black, and purple crystal identity cards. The purple crystal identity card was the most honorable. But in this world, there was only one real identity card made of white jade. On it, there was the name of the law enforcement master, the location of the law enforcement, and so on. And this identity card was known by everyone in the world. Once it was taken out, it represented the arrival of Han Shaoran himself. What kind of status was this? Now, in the mouth of this Grand Duke's son, it actually became a passionate little poem and didn't represent anything else? Chapter 937. Chu Yang looked at Archduke's son with a complicated expression. He thought to himself, if Brother Han were to face such a situation, would he vomit blood? This guy, even if he's not dozens of years old, he should be at least dozens of kilograms. Even if he doesn't have any knowledge, he should at least have some common sense, right? Such common sense that even ordinary people in the heavens could recite. This guy actually doesn't know. And no one would dare to imitate such an identity jade token. It was said that there was once an expert who acted like a tyrant. In just 2 days he was exposed and all law enforcement officers saw him as a public enemy. The Dharma Supreme personally gave an order. If any big clan dares to cover up for him, they will all be eliminated. Such an order could directly shake the heavens. As expected, the big clans didn't want to offend the Dharma Supreme over this matter. So, within 3 days, that person's head was chopped off, soaked in lime and preserved, and paraded around the heavens. Since then, no one dared to do so. But this Archduke's son actually didn't recognize it. Even though King of Hell Chu had lived 2 lives, it was his first time seeing such a super idiot. It's just a poem? Chu Yang asked with a strange expression. Yes. Sun Duanma looked at him in astonishment, and then realized. Could it be an acrostic poem? As he said, he lowered his head to study it and said, Acrostic poem. Tsang Ji here? Suddenly he flew into a rage. Little brother, are you kidding me? What does this Tsang Ji here mean? Sun Kenjiang reminded him. Big brother, maybe it's not an acrostic poem, but an acrostic poem. Sun Duanma was suddenly enlightened. He hurriedly took a look and recited. Cold, fearful of heaven? Cold, fearful of heaven? He raised his head to look at his brother and asked in confusion. What does it mean? Sun Kenjiang scratched his head and thought hard. Suddenly he flew into a rage and said, Who cares what it means? Let's do this first. Damn it, pretending to be mysterious. I thought it was some big shot. Wait. Eldest young master. This matter can't be. Finally, there was someone who understood and said with trembling lips. This is the identity jade token of the Southeast Law Enforcement Officer, Han Shaoran. Master Han? Sun Duanma frowned. Which Master Han? What Master Han? At this time, The innkeeper was trembling with fear and wanted to mediate, but when he heard this, his face turned pale and he ran out. He untied a horse and galloped towards the Sun family's residence. My God, this is a disaster as big as the heavens. Eunuch Sun recited a poem on the identity jade plate of the law enforcement master of the Southeast region. My God, how could this happen in my store? These two eunuchs have really caused a lot of trouble for me. I can only hope that I can deliver the news quickly so that I can still make it in time. This shopkeeper was also a smart person. He knew that if he went forward to mediate, not only would the two men who did not know who Master Han was not by it, they would also beat him up. The only ones who could stop them were the Sun family members. At this moment, Sun Duanhua and his brother in the inn finally knew who Sir Han was. Looking at the pale faces of the other dukes, the two of them laughed out loud. Law enforcement officer, so it's the law enforcement officer. Look at you guys, don't you know? The thing that I'm least afraid of is the law enforcement officer. The local law enforcement hall's hall master, Zhou Yade, is my uncle. Sun Duanhua said proudly. My biological uncle. The other dukes looked at him with pity and thought to themselves, your uncle? Even your biological father can't do it. This is the identity jade plate of the Southeast law enforcement master, Han Xiaoran. What kind of person was Han Xiaoran? He was famous for being impartial. They looked at each other and had the intention to retreat. No wonder you're so awesome. It turns out that you have a law enforcement hall master as your backer. Chu Yang sneered and said, What a powerful official! Looking at the few cowering teenagers, Chu Yang's body flashed and blocked the door. He said mercilessly, Since you're here, then stay here. Sun Duanhua's eyes flashed fiercely. They're only 3 people. No one will know if we kill them. I know a lot about the rules of the law enforcement officers. Won't it be fine if we cover them from top to bottom? The foppish young masters were originally perturbed. Now that they saw that Chu Yang actually didn't care about them leaving, they immediately became excited. Go! Kill him! With a shout, 7 to 8 people rushed up at the same time. The guards who had been waiting outside attacked at the same time. Chu Yang sneered. You don't know what's good for you. His hands shook and sword auras shot out in all directions. With a clang, the power of the Sword Emperor was released. The swords of these people flew up into the air. Xi Xiecheng watched quietly from inside and said, There's no need to comprehend any Tao state. Kill! Kill as quickly as possible. Chu Jiang said lightly. Kill to your heart's content. It's not satisfying to kill like this. The swords were like the wind, striking out like a storm. With a few claps, all kinds of swords flew out from the hands of these people and were inserted into the door frame in a neat row. The foppish young masters' faces turned pale. They shouted and turned to escape. How could Chu Yan let them escape? With a point of his sword, the few dukes and their attendants screamed and fell to the ground. Chu Yang shouted, Waiter! The waiter of the inn came forward in fear and trepidation. With his teeth chattering, he said, Guest! Do you have any orders? Prepare a long rope, it must be sturdier. Prepare a few horses. Go quickly! If you don't find me in half an hour, I'll slaughter your entire inn. Chu Yang said fiercely. Chu Yang was also very angry about this inn. Just now, when a group of foppish young masters came to snatch people, no one in the inn, including the shopkeeper and the waiter, said a word. This was the inn that the Zhuge clan chose to welcome guests. How could they behave like this? At this moment, the king of Hell Chu almost had an impulse to burn this inn to the ground. But after thinking for a while, he finally suppressed this thought. Yes. The waiter was so scared that he wet his pants and ran out in a hurry. Today, I'll parade the streets for the Zhuge clan in the south. Chu Jiang said lightly. While I'm at it, I'll start a massacre here. I'd like to see how many people there are for me to kill in this small place. Murderous aura surged out in an overwhelming manner. The few dukes' faces turned pale. Looking at this killing god, they were already regretting so much that their intestines turned green. They didn't expect that the person beside the beauty was actually such a ferocious person. Not only could they not afford to offend his background, they also couldn't afford to offend him personally, the Sun Clan. In the living room, the clan master of the Sun Clan, Sun Chinkai, was drinking tea with two people. These two people were the chief and deputy chief of the local law enforcement hall. The two of you have graced us with your presence. Please stay for a while longer. I'll do my part as a host. Later, we won't rest until we're drunk. My cellar has a collection of fine wine. Sun Chinkai was a skinny man. At this moment, he was laughing heartily and serving tea attentively. The huge Zhou Yade laughed and said with a serious expression, "Brother Sun, brother-in-law, I'm naturally here to drink today. But I also have something to tell you." Seeing that he was serious, Sun Chinkai couldn't help but ask with interest, "What is it?" "This year's medicine banquet is held once in 1,000 years in the heavens. It's hosted by the Zhuge clan and is extremely important. In the past, this place was close to the border of no man's land. You can do whatever you want. But now, it's become the gateway of the Zhuge clan. Brother Sun, you have to be careful. During this period of time, I haven't seen any movements from you. You must not be careless." Zhou Yade said. Sun Chinkai laughed and said, "It's okay. Although this place has become a gateway, it's just a passing route. Ordinary people wouldn't stay here at all and would just leave directly. I've already made careful arrangements. I don't think there'll be any problems." Zhou Yade nodded and said, "In the past, I've done everything I could to help. After all, we're relatives and those things aren't considered a big deal. But during this period of time, as long as people come, we can't afford to offend them. You have to know this in your heart." Sun Chinkai nodded and said, "Of course I know this." Zhou Yade pondered and said, "There's another thing that I'm sure you've heard about. A person came from the southeast with a beautiful girl. Along the way, he killed a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. The Shin clan, which is 1,000 miles away, isn't as powerful as your clan, but it's not too far off. Because the entire clan mobilized to snatch the beauty for their son, this lecherous killer directly killed his way into the clan. There were more than 300 people in the clan, and not a single one was spared." Sun Chinkai shuddered and said, "Yes, there's such a thing. Now, that person is coming this way. I reckon that he'll enter this place within 1 or 2 days." Zhou Yade looked at Sun Chinkai meaningfully. Sun Chinkai's face turned pale and he nodded repeatedly. I understand. I'll definitely discipline those 2 little bastards strictly to prevent them from causing trouble." "It's not as simple as trouble," Zhou Yade said indifferently. "I heard that although this person is young, his cultivation is close to that of a sword saint. Even if your Sun clan goes all out, you may not be his match. His female companion is an outstanding beauty. If my 2 nephews take a fancy to her." Sun Chinkai's hair stood on end and he said, "I'll make arrangements immediately. Just be careful in everything." Zhou Yade smiled slightly. At this moment, a servant suddenly came in hurriedly and reporting to the clan head, "The head shopkeeper of the Heavenly Fortune Inn is here. He said that he has something important to report to the clan head regarding the young master." "Heavenly Fortune Inn?" Zhou Yade frowned. "Isn't that the place where the pharmacists of the medicine banquet are staying?" Cold sweat appeared on Sun Chinkai's face and he hurriedly said, "Ask him to come in quickly." He muttered, "Could it be that those 2 little bastards have caused some trouble?" As he said that, the cold sweat on his face became the size of soybeans and dripped down profusely. "I'm afraid that the trouble this time isn't small." Zhou Yade frowned. As long as there are guests staying there, there would be the pharmacists of the big clans or law enforcement officers, and then there would be the pharmacists of the Medicine Valley. No matter which aspect it is, it's very difficult to provoke. Even some idle pharmacists would have experts guarding them. Chapter 938. Hearing Zhou Yade's words, Sun Chinkai became even more perturbed. He begged, "Brother Zhou, brother-in-law, if something happens this time and I can't hold on, you have to help me." Zhou Yade sighed. As long as it's not a big matter, I think my law enforcement haul still has some weight. Everyone will more or less give me some face for the sake of the law enforcement officers. Don't worry. Sun Chikai was slightly relieved. At this time, the fat shopkeeper of the Heavenly Fortune Inn finally rolled in like a rubber ball. He shouted with a face full of excitement. Old Master Sun, it's really bad this time. If you dare to go there quickly, there might still be hope. Sun Chikai shouted. Shut up! Speak slowly! What big matter is it? Is it worth being so flustered? Howling like this in the hall of my Sun family, where is your decency? The fat shopkeeper's fat face was full of sweat. It's the two sirs. The two sirs had a conflict with someone in the inn. A conflict? Hearing this, Sun Chikai was actually relieved. If it was just a conflict, then it would be easy to handle. Just a conflict? What's the background of the other party? Sun Chikai picked up the teacup and drank slowly. He was extremely calm. Tell me the details of the matter. The fat shopkeeper was so anxious that he kept patting his butt. He said, Today, a warrior from the Juga clan sent a guest to the inn. This guest was extremely young and handsome. He was dressed in black and looked very handsome. He also seemed to have a good temper. Get to the point. Sun Chikai was even more relieved. He seemed to have a good temper? Those who were being bullied now were all good-tempered people. Looks like my son didn't suffer any losses. It's good that he didn't suffer any losses. This guest brought two women with him. One was an adult girl, and the other was a little girl. The adult girl covered her face and looked very charming. I don't know how the two sirs knew. The fat shopkeeper stammered. He really wanted to slap his own mouth. He was usually quite talkative. Why was he stammering today? Brought a girl? Sun Chikai was stunned. The teacup stopped at the edge of his mouth. I don't think so, Zhou Yade said. I heard that the girl next to the foppish guy didn't cover her face. Sun Chinkai's expression softened again as he blew on the tea. What happened next? Later, the two lords, Lord Qian, Lord Zhao, Lord Li, and Lord Jing rushed over. They took a fancy to that woman and wanted to make a move. The fat shopkeeper stammered. Well, what happened after that? Sun Chikai said faintly. You didn't kill those people, did you? The fat shopkeeper looked at the master of the Sun family in surprise. Do you think I would come to report if your son had the upper hand? Do you think I'll report if it's not too much trouble? No. That customer took out an identity jade token, and there was a poem on it, the fat shopkeeper said. Identity jade tablet? A poem? What poem? At this point, Zhou Yade's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't hold himself back and asked first. He prayed in his heart, jade pendant. Poetry? God, please don't let it be that. The poem. I still remember it. It's the cold world of the southeast, and Mo Shaoran, the law enforcer of the human world, righteous and fearless, this heart can face the heavens. The fat shopkeeper gestured and said, I feel that something is wrong. It seems to be the waist token of the Southeast Law Enforcement Master Han. Dang! Dang! 2 teacups fell to the ground at the same time and broke into pieces. When Sun Chikai and Zhou Yade heard the first line of the poem, their teacups fell to the ground at the same time. The tea splashed onto their robes, but the two of them didn't seem to notice it. Both of them had the same expression. They stared blankly at the fat shopkeeper with their eyes and mouths wide open. Their 4 eyeballs almost popped out at the same time and almost fell to the ground. At this moment, both of them almost forgot to breathe. After being stunned for a while, they roared at the same time. What? Both of their hearts turned cold. Master Sun snatched a woman from Han Shaoran. Law Enforcement Master Han? This. What the hell is this? Even if you don't want to live anymore, you can't do this. What happened after that? Sun Chikai only felt that his heart was beating like a drum. The sweat on his face flowed down like a waterfall. He didn't even notice that it had flowed into his eyes. He just stared blankly at the fat shopkeeper and said with a glimmer of hope, Both of you should have left after seeing this jade token, right? No, the fat shopkeeper answered bitterly. Did they apologize to him? Zhou Yade asked as if he was moaning. No. The fat shopkeeper wiped his sweat. What exactly happened? Tell me quickly. What was the reaction of my two sons after seeing this poem? Sun Chinkai almost jumped up and roared angrily. He almost lifted the roof. The Grand Duke said, the Grand Duke praised, good poem, very good poem. The fat shopkeeper said while trembling with fear. Bang, bang, 3 sounds. It turned out that the 3 people present had been shaken to the ground along with their chairs by this sentence of good poem, good poem. Their limbs were in the air. Bastard! Sun Chinkai was stunned on the ground for a while. Then he groaned with a twisted face and wanted to cry. The identity jade token of the law enforcement master. He actually praised it for a good poem. It's over, it's over. Zhou Yade, who had just patted his chest and promised to deal with the future troubles for his brother-in-law, lay on the ground in exhaustion. He didn't even have the strength to get up. I've been ruined by your Sun clan. Sun Chinkai, you've really raised 2 good sons. Which one of the tens of billions of people in the entire heavens doesn't know about the identity jade token of the law enforcement master? Your son actually didn't know about it. It's fine if he didn't know about it, but he actually praised it for a good poem. It's fine if he praised it for a good poem, but he actually went to snatch other people's women. He suddenly jumped up with red eyes. What the fuck have I done in my previous generation? Why am I related to your family in this generation? What happened after that? Sun Chinkai asked feebly with a glimmer of hope. What happened after that? Then I came to report. The fat shopkeeper said while trembling with fear. The 3 people in the hall fell to the ground in exhaustion. What should we do? Brother-in-law. Sun Chinkai seemed to be unable to get up. How would I know what to do? Zhou Yade said angrily. This matter has nothing to do with me. From today onwards, our 2 clans will break off all relations. I don't know you, and you don't know me. Sun Chinkai said furiously. Bullshit. You actually want to wash your hands of this matter? Wash your hands of this matter. Zhou Yade, if it wasn't for our Sun clan, would you be able to live so comfortably all these years? Just how many purple crystals have you taken? Just how many girls have you played with? Just how many bribes and perverts have you done? Let me tell you, don't think that you'll have an easy time in this matter. If our Sun clan is finished, I'll risk my life to drag your Zhou clan down with me. Okay. You bastard, Zhou Yade said feebly. You're just dragging me down. Motherfucker! What are you still standing there for? Hurry up and invite the old ancestor of your Sun clan to come out, prepare a generous gift, and find all the important figures to apologize to him. Why are you still shouting? Yes. Sun Chinkai was suddenly enlightened. He jumped up with a whoosh and shouted repeatedly. Someone, come! Neo, quickly go and invite the old ancestors. You, tell Madam to prepare a generous gift. The more generous the better. It's not a problem to take out all our assets. Quick! After a series of urging, the few servants and warriors who had just rushed in were scared witless, and rushed out again. After Sun Chinkai finished shouting, he sat down on the ground again and cried. God, what sin has our Sun clan committed? We actually caused such a huge disaster. I hope that the heavens will open their eyes and let our Sun clan get through this. Zhou Yade said angrily. What sin have you committed? Don't you know what sin have you committed? Your 2 sons are 2 lecherous ghosts. Whenever they fancy a girl, no matter if she has a husband or not, they want to play with her. How many times have you stopped them? It's also your connivance that caused such a huge disaster. You can't absolve yourself from the blame. Sun Chinkai sighed and murmured. What's the use of saying this now? He lowered his head dejectedly. The sound of hurried footsteps came from the hall. A fat woman rushed out. Sun Chinkai, are you crazy? You actually want to give away all your assets? Are you out of your mind? Sun Chinkai was furious. It was precisely because he had nowhere to vent his anger that he jumped up and slapped his wife's face. Bastard! I asked you to prepare and you just do it. Do you want to die? If it weren't for the two little beasts that you raised, why would I give away all my assets? Ah? Duanma and Kanjiang? The fat woman covered her face and was about to get angry when she heard this sentence. She cried out in horror. What happened to them? Hurry up and prepare. Sun Chikai jumped up and roared. If you're late, not only will you two die, but also our whole family will die. The fat woman panicked and repeatedly agreed and ran back. Figures flashed and 3 old men came in. Chenkai, what happened? Sun Chenkai was about to answer when he suddenly heard a commotion outside. It seemed that something big had happened in the distance. There was a hubbub of voices that shook the sky. The sound of footsteps was heard. A warrior rushed in with sweat all over his head. He didn't even report and hurriedly said, reporting to the family, something bad has happened. What happened? Sun Chikai pulled out a strand of his beard. He stomped his feet and roared. Speak! The 2 dukes and their attendants, as well as the dukes of the Zhao, Li, Qian, and Jing families, have been tied together with ropes. They are going up and down the street and walking towards here. They have already started fighting. The warrior hurriedly said. Started fighting? Sun Chingsai's round face suddenly flattened again. His eyeballs bulged out. He shouted in fear and panic. Who is fighting with whom? There are also dukes of our family, Li family, Zhao family, Jing family, Qian family. They all want to save their dukes. So they started fighting. There is only one person on the other side, but he is too powerful. Now there is a river of blood. Chapter 939. Blood has flowed like a river? Sun Chenkai muttered unconsciously. Suddenly, tears fell from his eyes. What else do you want to do to kill me? He suddenly became furious. Blood has flowed like a river. Is there any way to salvage the situation? The warrior's face was full of sweat. What should we do? Clan head, please make a decision. As long as you give the order, we'll save young master even if we have to die. What to do? What else can I do? Now, other than hanging himself, he couldn't even make a cold dish. Sun Chikai rolled his eyes and cried. Mother! Then, he fell down softly. Zhou Yade frowned and hurriedly asked the fat shopkeeper. Didn't you send the letters to the other clans? Why did they start fighting all of a sudden? Were those families all idiots? The other party is the special envoy of law enforcement Master Han. Do those clans want to go against the entire law enforcement team? Where did they get the guts to do that? The fat shopkeeper said miserably. I came here the moment I heard that something bad was going to happen. How would I have the time to send letters to those clans? I think they don't know that they're facing the special envoy of law enforcement Master Han. They only want to save their son, it's over. Zhou Yade sighed deeply. He said hatefully. These frogs at the bottom of the well. They've been cooped up here every day. How would they know how big the outside world is? They only have a little hemorrhoid-like strength. There are too many people who can kill them easily. They're actually so arrogant. They're asking for it. He sighed again despondently. It's a pity that you bastards have implicated me too. The few elders of the Sun clan were confused. What exactly happened? Is it so serious? Zhou Yade was no longer in the mood to be angry. He explained the matter in a daze. Before he could finish, the few old ancestors were shocked. They stood there dumbfounded. They almost couldn't believe their ears. Our Sun clan actually has such a talent. You usually abduct women, and everyone just turns a blind eye to it. Anyway, there's no one in the local area who can compete with our Sun clan. Of course, nothing will happen. So what if you abduct them? But at such a critical moment, you should at least behave yourself. This is the medicine banquet, how important is that? Once something happened, not to mention who you had provoked, once the Zhuge clan was enraged, the Sun clan would immediately be annihilated. He actually went out to fool around at such a time. It's fine if you go out and fool around, but don't get into trouble. Even if you wanted to stir up trouble, you shouldn't have stirred up too much trouble. But now you've stirred up a huge trouble that's beyond redemption. Not only did he use law enforcement Master Han's identity jade token to praise his poem, but he also wanted to snatch his woman. Just thinking about this made him feel as if thunder was rumbling above his head. How stupid would one have to be to do such a thing? This was not only big trouble, but also a big joke. The three old men looked at each other, not knowing what to do. "Let's go and take a look," one of them shouted. "If we can salvage some of it, then so be it. Otherwise, the Sun family is really finished." The three of them finally regained their senses and rushed out anxiously. Sun Chunkai also regained his senses and rushed out together with Zhou Yade as if their butts were on fire. "Oh my God, it's fine if a few of us die, but please don't let anything happen to Law Enforcement Master Han's special envoy. Who doesn't know that Law Enforcement Master Han is the most ruthless person in the heavenly layer?" The two of them prayed in their hearts as they ran. The more they thought, the more they felt that it was impossible. As they ran, their faces were full of tears. "What a sin!" In the hall, the fat shopkeeper scratched his head. "What the heck, it seems that there's nothing for me to do. Damn it, I've risked my life to inform them, but they didn't even reward me." He scratched his fat head and walked out. "Fine, I'll go and take a look too. Anyway, there's nothing for me to do. My inn's business might be very popular in the future. By then, everyone would ask, who was the one who said in that Law Enforcement Master Han's identity jade token was a good poem? Such a powerful person really needs to be worshipped. That place is also a place of historical interest. Therefore, word spread from mouth to mouth, and everyone came to stay there. Although the reputation wasn't good, they would still be rich. At this moment, there was already an earth-shattering fight outside. Chu Yan walked out of the inn while holding the hands of a few officials, and instantly caused a sensation. Who in North Wind Town didn't know about these few hedonistic young masters? Who didn't know about them? How many people hadn't been bullied by these few hedonistic young masters? How many people's families had been ruined because of them? Especially those who had daughters. As long as their daughters were a little beautiful, they couldn't wait to hide their daughters in their cellars. Once they were discovered, they would definitely not be able to escape from their misfortune. Countless daughters from good families had been ruined by these people. If they resisted slightly, their families would be ruined. The local youths all gnashed their teeth in hatred. 30 to 40% of the young men had been cuckolded after marrying their wives. What kind of humiliation was this? Even if they were ordinary people, how could they be indifferent to this? Although the Sun clan was powerful, and they would be beaten to death if they resisted slightly, they didn't dare to do so. On the surface, they didn't dare to do anything. But who in the mainland didn't hate these bastards to the bone? Now, they actually saw that someone had tied them up like candied haws and paraded them through the streets. Immediately, the crowd was boiling with emotions, and everyone was very happy. At the same time, they were also worried that this person wouldn't be able to withstand the revenge of the Sun clan. Everyone followed along to watch the show, and the crowd grew larger and larger. Everyone wanted to see these bad guys get their retribution. Even if they didn't personally take revenge, they would still feel good just by watching it. Heaven has eyes. Finally, these bad guys were all caught. Hopefully, this time, they could really get rid of all evil. We have already been bullied by these bastards for a long time. Chu Yang held the large group of people's hands and walked out in large strides. After walking for a short distance, he gave them a fierce tug, and then a series of somersaults followed behind. The faces of these hedonistic young masters were filled with despair and defeat, and their bodies were dripping with blood. They looked at Chu Yang with despair and deep hatred. As they walked, the muscles in their bodies spasmed painfully. Perhaps these people had never dreamed that they would one day be tied up and paraded through the streets like dogs. Chu Yang also stuck a wooden token on each of their bodies. On it, their names were written in bold and eye-catching bright red. It was erected high, and very conspicuous. This wooden token was inserted into the flesh of their backs, and it was stuck between the bones. Blood and flesh were dripping. Every step they took, they would feel a heart-wrenching pain. This pain was so clear, but it only made them feel incomparably clear-headed, and wouldn't make them faint. If they fell down once, that kind of pain was simply like dying once, dying with a clear mind. These people had always been spoiled and domineering. They didn't even practice martial arts, so how could they bear such pain? As they walked, blood dripped and screamed along the way. In the end, they almost didn't even have the strength to groan. Wherever Chu Yang walked, a path would automatically open up. Looking at the direction of this path, it was directly leading to the Sun Clan. On both sides of the path, everyone watched as Chu Yang pulled this group of people along like dogs. The entire path was dripping with blood. The situation was so cruel and bloody, but no one showed fear in their eyes. Everyone's eyes were filled with joy. It was a kind of joy that came from being able to hold one's head high after being bullied for a long time. Although no one spoke, that kind of excitement was like a sudden rainstorm after being extremely stuffy in a hot summer. Everyone's eyes were filled with fanaticism as they looked at Chu Yang. Countless people's eyes were filled with gratitude. No matter what you did it for, as long as you killed these bastards, you're our benefactor. Many people were calculating in their hearts. As long as these bastards died, they would immediately erect a long life memorial tablet for their benefactor. The widest road in North Wind Town was actually packed with people in an instant. The sound of clothes fluttering in the air quickly sounded, and a few figures flew over. The person in the lead was dressed in black, with the words law enforcement embroidered on his chest. The first to arrive was indeed the law enforcement. That person had already shouted in the air. "Where are you from, friends? Let's talk nicely. I'm from the local law enforcement hall." Before he finished his words, Chu Yang raised his head. His eyes flashed like lightning, and his ferocious intent was revealed. Those few law enforcement hall's eyes met with such a gaze in midair, and they couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. They actually didn't finish their words. Chu Yang didn't say anything, and just waved his hand. A ray of light flew over slowly. That person reached out to catch it, and felt that it was warm and soft. He lowered his head and was instantly shocked. He hurriedly landed. "I didn't know that the envoy of the Southeast Law Enforcement Master had come. Please excuse me for not going out to meet you." How could a small law enforcement hall be compared with Han Xiaoran's status? Chu Yang had Han Xiaoran's identity jade token, and his status was equivalent to Han Xiaoran's. Although the South wasn't under Han Xiaoran's jurisdiction, the status of the law enforcement master was enough to crush them to death. Even though they weren't under Han Xiaoran's direct command, Han Xiaoran only needed to say one word to destroy this law enforcement hall. How would these people dare to neglect? Chu Yang said indifferently and coldly. "Wait at the side and be my witness." That person said, "Yes." Then he said, "Your Honor, how did these few people offend you?" How did they offend me, and you don't know?" Chu Yang looked at him coldly. "Say it again, and I'll hear it." That person was sweating profusely. "I don't dare." Since they had rushed over immediately, they must have been nearby when the incident happened. How could they not know? Chu Yang sneered and said sarcastically, "I don't need you to uphold justice, and you can't uphold justice. I don't need you to speak. You just need to bring your eyes and ears, and not your mouths. If you dare to reveal my identity, you'll be punished with the same crime as the few behind me." He glared. "After I've settled this matter, I'll settle accounts with you. Do you understand?" "Yes." That law enforcement hall was sweating profusely. Under Chu Yang's ferocious aura, he only felt as if he was naked in the wasteland. His whole body was cold, and his lower body was so tight that it almost spurted out at the same time. Chapter 940. This small head of the law enforcement officers trembled all over as he led his subordinates to one side. He didn't dare to get too close, nor did he dare to stay too far away. He didn't even dare to say a single word. He originally wanted to send someone to inform Zhou Yade, but after sensing Chu Yang's awe-inspiring aura, he didn't even dare to think about it. So, he retreated to one side. Looking at the few dukes who had been beaten, frightened and tortured to the point that they didn't even look human now, he became more and more shocked. This master was truly vicious. This special envoy is really valiant. He actually directly enforced the law in the south with the token of the Southeast Law Enforcement Master. Awesome. I really don't know how much trouble he will make today before he stops. But from the looks of it, it's almost impossible for them to settle this peacefully. It seems that this time, North Wind Town is going to have a bloodbath. Whoosh! 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 That was the sound of experts from the other 4 clans rushing over to rescue them. There was a commotion in the crowd. Like waves, they parted to form a path. A few clans came out from the crowd. When they saw their own dukes being chained up and paraded through the streets behind Chu Yang, their pupils suddenly shrank. A tall and sturdy man walked out with large strides. He cupped his fists and saluted. He said loudly, "Friend, please wait. I am from the Qian family. Behind you, the one who is being tortured is my grandfather. May I ask what did my grandfather do to offend you and cause you to do such evil deeds? No matter what, you've gone too far, right? You must know that in the martial world, nothing can be more reasonable than reason. How could I have led to such evil deeds? Everything can't be justified?" Chu Yang insipidly repeated these words. He then raised his head and said, "You mean to say that I've done something wrong today? I'm unreasonable?" This sentence was very plain, but an aura of an impending storm spread out spontaneously. Murderous intent was faintly discernible. The burly man couldn't help but take a step back. He said unyieldingly, "No matter who's right or wrong, my grandfather can't be humiliated by you. Let my grandfather go first. We'll discuss who's right and who's wrong later." The law enforcement officers who were following in the dark closed their eyes. They're done for. If the Qian clan had come up and apologized, they might have been spared. But now, it was impossible. Chu Yang nodded slowly. He looked around and asked in a deep voice, "The Qian clan's people are here. I wonder if the Li clan's people are here?" "The people from the Li clan are here." On the left, the crowd parted to form a path. Dozens of people stood in the middle. A burly man in purple stood upright and unafraid. He looked at Chu Yang fiercely. "Young man, quickly let go of my son!" It turned out that the head of the Li family had come in person. Chu Yang's eyes were cold and clear as he looked at him. "You're not asking for the truth, and you're asking for my son's release first?" The Li family's patriarch laughed sinisterly. "Little one, you're already at death's door. Why would I bother to discuss right and wrong with you?" The few law enforcement officers in the dark looked at the head of the Li clan with pity in their eyes. They reckoned that the entire Li clan would be finished after hearing this sentence. Chu Yang nodded slowly. "Good, very good. Where are the people of the Sun clan?" A big man came out from the crowd. "I'm from the Sun family. Little one, if you don't let my grandfather go, this place will be your death. Today is the anniversary of your death." The attitudes of the major clans were getting tougher and tougher. "Very good. The Sun clan is also here." Chu Yang's face became calmer and calmer. He said, "The Qian clan, Sun clan, and Li clan are all here. Where are the people of the Zhao clan and the Jing clan?" Another 2 groups of people appeared and shouted, "Let him go first, then we'll talk. All 5 clans are here." Chu Yang laughed and said, "I understand what all of you mean. That is to say, no matter who's right or wrong, I have to let him go first, right? Even if your grandfather has committed a heinous crime first, I still have to let him go first, right? Am I right?" The people of the 5 clans gathered together. There were a total of 300 to 400 people. They looked at each other, and were all emboldened. The big man from the Qian clan laughed and said, "You're right. Even if our grandfather is wrong, he's still right. If you don't let him go, you can't escape death either. The 2 women behind you, one big and one small, don't even think about living happily. A loud shout came from outside. Well said. An elder in green walked in slowly. The big man from the Qian clan hurriedly bowed and said, Clan Master, you actually came in person. The green-clothed elder slowly nodded. His hands were behind his back as he slowly walked forward. His hawk-like eyes stared closely at Chu Yang as he said indifferently, Young man, I know that you have some background, but this is Northern Wind Town. Let me give you a piece of advice. Before your strength reaches a certain level, don't do anything impulsive. For today's matter, as long as you're willing to let them go, apologize sincerely, and ask your teacher to come out and talk nicely, I can make the decision to let this matter go. Otherwise, your blood will splatter in front of you. The elder in green looked at Chu Yang indifferently. Young man, what do you think? Chu Yang took a long breath and said, These people want to steal my wife, and they've already stolen the wives of many people. In your eyes, this kind of behavior is right? The big man next to him laughed and said, This is heaven. Do you know? Whether it was resources, women, or crystals, everything belonged to the strong. If someone steals your wife, you can only blame yourself for not having the ability. We don't think this is right, but as long as you have the ability, you can also steal other people's wives. As long as you're strong enough, no one will say anything about you. Do you understand? Chu Yang smiled strangely. Is that so? The big man said affirmatively. Yes. Chu Yang looked up at the elder in green and the other clan masters and asked lightly. You guys didn't say anything. It seems that you guys agree with what he said? The elder in green frowned. You let them go first. I order you to let them go first. Order me? Chu Yang laughed and floated forward. With his hands behind his back, he said lightly, Since that's the case, don't blame me for being ruthless and starting a massacre. His eyes slowly swept across the people from the 5 great clans and said, I ask those who are not involved to move away to avoid accidental injury. Needless to say, the crowd had already dispersed far away. Only Chu Yang and the 5 great clans were facing each other. The people from the 5 great clans looked coldly at Chu Yang's words and actions. Their eyes were full of mockery. This little guy was really audacious. Did he want to fight against the 5 great clans with his own strength? Your words have dispelled the last bit of concern in my heart. On the long street, Chu Yang's black clothes fluttered in the autumn wind. He smiled and said, I was originally quite apprehensive about exterminating the entire clan. I thought that it was immoral. But now I understand what it means to be jackals of the same lair. What it means to die for the 5 great clans present today. Chu Yang looked coldly at the people opposite him and said word by word, I hereby swear to the heavens that the 5 great clans will be removed from the upper 3 heavens from today onwards. I will eliminate the weeds by the roots and leave no one alive. He paused and said word by word, The 5 great clans, men, women, old and young, will all be killed. No one will escape punishment. At this moment, the crowd was silent. Chu Yang's voice spread out and was heard far and near. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the crowd. The old man in green was actually not angry. He looked at Chu Yang with interest. You actually want to exterminate the 5 great clans with your own strength? Ha! The people behind him laughed in unison. Chu Yang looked at them coldly. The murderous intent in his eyes became more and more intense. He suddenly recited, Moving unhindered in the world, what is difficult with a sword in hand? Slaying the world is not finished, slaughtering people is not idle. Blood surges 1,000 feet under the sword, white bones under the feet like mountains. Slaughtering thousands of people, the first drop of blood is not cold. This was a poem that the sword spirit recited when he attacked in the northern wastelands of the upper 3 heavens. That time, no one was left alive under the sword spirit's attack. This time, Chu Yang recited this poem again at this moment. His determination was already the same as the sword spirit's at that time. Kill! Leave no one alive! Little guy, it seems that you don't know how to appreciate kindness? The old man in green, the clan master of the Qian clan, narrowed his eyes. Chu Yang smiled and retreated to the side of the young man from the Qian clan. He stretched out his hand and pulled hard. The young man from the Qian clan let out a shrill scream. His left hand, together with the skin and bones and long tendons, was pulled down. After a blood-curdling scream, he completely fainted. Chu Yang's leg flew up and kicked up a piece of soil on the ground. Then, he stepped on the broken bone with the soil. He crushed it hard. He turned back and grinned at the clan master of the Qian clan. He revealed his white teeth, but with a chilling intent. Clan Master Qian, are you satisfied with this? Are you happy? As he spoke, he lifted his foot and stomped on the Qian clan's dandy's crotch. With two popping sounds, it was as if 2 eggs had been crushed under his foot. Instantly, a bloody mess was formed, and blood gushed out from his lower body like a fountain. If you were unhappy just now, are you happy now? Chu Yang sneered and looked at the clan master of the Qian clan. The clan master of the Qian clan, who was originally calm, was completely distorted in an instant. He saw his own son being abused in front of his eyes, and even crushed Sun Jian on the spot. What kind of feeling was this? His vision turned black, and he almost fainted. He roared angrily, and his heart seemed to be torn apart at this moment. Little Hao! He roared at the top of his lungs. Little guy, you hurt my son. I swear, I will cut you into pieces. He raised his head, and his eyes had already turned blood red. Your son also treated others like this, and not just one. Chu Yang said indifferently. Your son is a son, and other people's children are not? Bullshit, how can those lowly people be compared to my son? How can 100,000 lowly slaves be compared to a strand of my son's hair? The clan master of the Qian clan roared angrily. Chu Yang smiled coldly. Can't be compared to your son? I will let your son be incomparable to those people right now. I'll make sure that even if he goes to hell, he'll be an incomplete ghost. He moved like the wind, and with a swoosh, he dug out the 2 eyeballs of this bastard. Chapter 941. My son! Qian clan's clan master howled in agony again. He flew up and said, Kill! However, he saw a flash in front of his eyes as 2 black objects flew towards him. He didn't even think before he hit them away. Then, he heard Chu Yang say with a smile, Catch! Oh, your son's eyeballs! You actually smashed them yourself. He was almost mad with anger. With a command, everyone rushed over from all directions. It was at this moment that he suddenly heard the sound of a sword clang. He couldn't help but be shocked. This soft chime was like a sound that shook one's soul. It was full of killing intent and indifference. It was like the prelude to a massacre from the heavens. Following that, at the same time, everyone who charged forward with their swords felt their swords emit a clang sound. All the swords pointed straight to the sky at the same time. Worship of 10,000 swords! Qian clan's clan master was shocked. His pupils shrank rapidly. He shouted, Wait! You're a sword emperor? Chu Yang smiled coldly. He walked forward with his hands behind his back. There were thousands of sword auras around him. Why? Can't I? Qian clan's clan master retreated rapidly. He shouted in panic, Sir Emperor, there might be a misunderstanding. His forehead was already sweating. He was anxious and scared. He didn't expect that this young man whose cultivation couldn't be seen was actually a sword emperor. The strongest in his clan was only a 3rd or 4th stage martial monarch. How could a small clan resist a sword emperor? At this moment, he had already lost all thoughts of revenge. Misunderstanding? Chu Yang smiled. I have a misunderstanding with your mother too. Damn it. You're actually saying that it's a misunderstanding at this moment? Chu Yang was so angry that he almost laughed. He stretched out his palm. With a sword chime, a long sword that shone with cold light appeared in his hand. He raised the sword. A cold light flashed and a head fell to the ground. Blood. Chu Yang's killing intent was blazing. He didn't hold back anymore. He shouted coldly, His black clothes fluttered like clouds. He had already rushed towards the crowd. The people from the 5 big clans rushed up crazily. Their swords and sabers fell together. Chu Yang raised his leg and kicked the headless corpse in front of him away. Then, he rushed forward, facing the rolling crowd. At this moment, he swung the thin and brittle long sword in a circle and actually used it as a large saber. With a raise of his sword, a head was cut off. Then, with a kick, the headless corpse was sent flying. With another swing of his sword, another head was cut off. With another kick, another headless corpse was sent flying. Suddenly, it was as if a watermelon stall had been knocked over. Countless heads rolled around on the ground. As the battle progressed, everyone frantically dodged and dodged. One after another, heads were kicked here and there. However, even if they were kicked away, a new head would immediately fall to the ground. Chu Yang's killing intent was overflowing, but his eyes were becoming calmer and calmer. He was surrounded by densely packed enemies, but he was extremely agile as he dodged and moved around. His sword chopped off one head after another as he dashed left and right. Wherever he went, there would be a wave of miserable cries. A wave of blood. He didn't use any ultimate move, he just chopped off his head so cleanly. Other than chopping off the head, he didn't touch anything else. I've said before that I'll make each and every one of you into an incomplete ghost. His black robe fluttered like a ghost. Sword after sword, sword after sword. Sword after sword. Goo 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 goo. Heads on the ground, one after another, one after another. Blood on the ground, puddles after puddles, puddles after puddles. What was called a river of blood. Perhaps this was it. Although this black-clothed figure was surrounded, no one could get within 3 steps of him. Everyone who rushed forward had their heads chopped off and their corpses kicked away in the first moment. Such a horrifying scene, how could an ordinary person see it in their lifetime? The crowd far away on both sides constantly exclaimed. Many people were so scared that their faces turned pale and their bodies trembled. However, no one left, and no one closed their eyes. Everyone's eyes were wide open. Although they were so scared that they were about to faint, their faces were filled with joy. Good kill! It was so satisfying to kill them. This bunch of scoundrels, someone should have dealt with them long ago. Many people knelt down in front of the blood and corpses, and prayed with tears streaming down their faces. Daughter, you can close your eyes in peace. Your benefactor has taken revenge for you. Your benefactor has avenged your humiliation. You're still my pure and innocent daughter. Daughter, you can be at ease. Those who had humiliated you and killed you are now facing an even more brutal massacre. They don't even have complete corpses. Even if you meet them in the underground, you'll be much more glorious than them. Wife, you can be at ease. Ever since you left, our family has been in a miserable state. Your daughter is only 7 or 8 years old. Before you died, you were still worried that your daughter wouldn't be humiliated by those beasts. Now you can be at ease. Those bastards are already dead. You'll be alone in the underground. You must remember, if you meet a bunch of headless ghosts, you must hide far away. They are those evil people. Chu Yang had slashed enough with his sword. Suddenly, he flew up and kicked the head of a big man. The head exploded with a bang. Before his body landed on the ground, another kick landed on the other Khan's head. Bang! Another explosion occurred. His feet kept flying in the air, and his head turned into a smashed watermelon. A bunch of bastards! Today, if this young master leaves you with a complete corpse, this young master will never roam the Jianghu again. Chu Yang's cold and cruel voice faintly resounded in the air. Anyone could tell with a single glance that this black-clothed youth was dealing with the hundreds of people in front of him with ease and ease. The pressure in front of him suddenly increased. A few figures flew out like ghosts and mixed in with the crowd, and attacked crazily. Chu Yang's eyes lit up. Monarch-level experts! Now you're finally willing to come out? He brandished his long sword, and sword energy overflowed. He faced them head-on. The 4 or 5 people on the opposite side grinned hideously. Even if you're the Sword Emperor, You're definitely not a match for the 5 of us. This is a clash of strength, and not a clash of sword moves that you're good at." Chu Yang saw the complacency in their eyes. He sneered in his heart and said faintly, "This is not a clash of strength. You're courting death." As he spoke, the 5 long swords quickly collided with each other. To their surprise, the moment their swords came into contact with the cold gleaming sword, it was as if their swords had suddenly turned into tofu. With a soft sound, their swords were cut into 2 pieces. For a moment, they were terrified, and their souls were scared out of their bodies. An extreme sense of crisis struck their hearts. They screamed and wanted to retreat. But it was too late. Chu Yang laughed and suddenly jumped up. His long sword suddenly turned into a big saber, and as fast as lightning, he slashed 5 times in a row. 5 heads fell from their necks in an instant. Blood spurted out of the necks of the 5 monarch-level experts at the same time, and shot up hundreds of feet into the sky. It was like a beautiful martial arts rainbow. At the same time, it was shocking. Chu Yang didn't even look at it. He quickly retreated, and with a slash to the left and a slash to the right, he chopped off 2 heads consecutively. With 2 kicks, 2 heads were kicked up into the air, and fiercely hit the heads of the other 2 who were rushing up. With 2 bangs, 4 heads exploded at the same time. On Chu Yang's side, he slashed with his sword in his right hand, and punched with his left hand. His feet swung back and forth like a whirlwind. There were already more than 10 people whose heads were either chopped off, smashed, or kicked by him. These hard human skulls were like tofu under his hands and feet. They were not hard at all. The clan master of the Qian clan kept retreating, and his face was already pale. Looking at a head not far from him, his face was pale. This was the head of the Li clan master. Just now, it was kicked many times from dozens of feet away before it rolled to his feet. His heart was now full of fear. Even in his dreams, he didn't expect that he had actually provoked such a huge trouble. Seeing the other party's bloody means, he knew that the other party wasn't just talking about exterminating the clan. The other party could do it. Because the other party was killing people, very happily. He was in a good mood. The 5 super clans had gathered a total of 300 people here. Now there were less than 100 left. The long street, which was hundreds of feet long, was already covered with blood. On the ground, there were very few places where the original color could be seen. The thick smell of blood rushed to the sky and hovered in the air, not dissipating for a long time. The clan master of the Qian clan looked around in fear, hoping to find a life-saving straw. If this went on, he would definitely be finished. Suddenly his eyes lit up. He finally saw hope. That was the 2 women, one big and one small, who were watching this massacre from afar. At this moment, they were escorting a few playboys and standing in the distance. The few playboys were already so scared that they lost control of their bowels. Looking at the puddles of blood spilling out and the heads rolling around on the ground, they were so scared that they couldn't control themselves. Oh heavens, is this a disaster caused by us? Isn't it just playing with a few women? We actually caused such a big disaster. On this side, the clan master of the Qian clan was overjoyed. With one look, he knew that the 2 women didn't have any cultivation. And this killing god was busy killing people at this moment, and didn't notice him. This is great. This is a heaven-sent opportunity. As long as he had those 2 women in his hands, he would have the initiative. He flew up and dashed over like lightning, with deep excitement in his eyes. He didn't dare to face Chu Yang, the Sword Emperor, but he was facing Zi Xieching, who was 10,000 times more terrifying. And now, seeing that Chu Yang didn't seem to notice him, he was even more overjoyed. He opened his mouth and laughed from the bottom of his heart. Chapter 942. Chu Yang clearly noticed the actions of the Qian clan's clan master from the corner of his eye, but the corners of his mouth revealed a trace of a sneer. He simply didn't care, nor did he try to stop him. "You bastard, you will soon know how wrong you are. This young master is at most an executioner, but the one you found is definitely an ancient demon king. Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead and hit your head until it bleeds. Clan Head Qian's body was as fast as the wind. He arrived in front of Zi Xiecheng smoothly. To be honest, he had never expected things to go so smoothly. The heavens are really helping me. A sinister smile appeared on his face. He was already thinking about what he would do once he got his hands on these two women and threatened them. Just as he was about to make a move, he saw the two women, one big and one small, smiling warmly at him. The small one's eyes curved into lovely crescent moons, squinting. Even the small rabbit teeth at the side of her mouth showed a little. The big one looked at him and smiled gently, like a fox that had seen a chicken. Patriarch Qian was a little confused. I'm here to capture you. What are you laughing at? Could it be that these two women were idiots? But in the next moment, he stopped thinking about this problem and shouted, You two lowly servants! He wanted to say, Get your ass over here! But just as the words were about to come out of his mouth, he suddenly felt dizzy. He didn't know how it turned into this sentence. Two lowly servants! What are you guys laughing at? Meh? The few law enforcement officers in the dark had already noticed this. Seeing that the situation was not good, they immediately jumped out to protect the two ladies. If something were to happen to the family of the apothecary envoy right under their noses, then they would no longer be able to survive. Look at how familiar this apothecary envoy was with killing people, but just as everyone was about to make a move, they heard such a sentence. Immediately, those who had already leaped up lost their breath and fell to the ground in a sorry state. Even though their bodies were in pain from the fall, their eyes were still wide open in disbelief. Seeing Family Head Qian rushing forward with a fierce look, he opened his mouth and cursed loudly. But then, he suddenly became gentle and even wagged his tail. Using the most nauseating tone, he said, What are you guys laughing at? Ah! The few law enforcement officers felt as if they were being struck by lightning. For a moment, all the hairs on his body stood on end, and his hair stood on end. Especially since the one who said this was an old man, it was even more inconceivable. Compared to the shock of the law enforcers, Patriarch Qian was so shocked that he almost collapsed. He was clearly thinking about that in his heart, but his mouth clearly said it out loud. He clearly heard these words coming out of his own mouth. He was immediately stunned. He covered his mouth and stopped in horror. What was going on? Chu Lur looked at Family Head Qian with interest as if she was watching a monkey show. Zi Xiecheng smiled faintly and looked at him. His gaze was as cold as ice and as cold as a knife. Zi Xiecheng, as a woman, hated this shameless family even more than Chu Yang did. Only women could understand the suffering of other women, and only women could understand how abominable and unforgivable the atrocities committed by these people were. What's going on? Family Head Qian looked at himself in horror. Once he said that, he suddenly felt that his voice was normal again. Was he possessed just now? He thought for a while and felt that the most important thing now was to catch these two women. As for whether they were possessed or not, he would think about it later. So, he flew up again. However, he jumped up in a dashing manner. His body, which was originally charging forward, suddenly did a carp flip in midair. This time, it was a big deal. His lower body was rushing forward, but his upper body didn't listen to his command and flipped backward like a carp. With a crisp sound, Patriarch Qian fell straight to the ground and grimaced in pain. His waist had been twisted. If this matter was spread out, it would definitely be a big joke. Twisting one's waist was something that wouldn't happen even to a martial grandmaster. However, Family Head Qian, a martial monarch, actually twisted his own waist. The few law enforcement officers nearby were already stunned. All of them stretched out their necks and opened their eyes wide, like startled chickens. They had really seen it today. Then, something even more shocking happened. Family Head Qian suddenly jumped up from the ground and scolded loudly. I'm really a bastard! A law enforcement officer swallowed a mouthful of saliva and stared blankly. Fuck! Is this Family Head Qian crazy? All the law enforcement officers were stunned. family head Qian was in tears and snot. His face was filled with extreme fear and disbelief. He raised his hand and slapped himself again and again. As he slapped himself, he scolded. I'm really a bastard. My ancestors have been cuckolded for generations. I'm not human at all, do you know that? I'm a beast. My father, my son, and my ancestors are all beasts. Not only am I a beast, but I'm also a bastard. And I'm a bastard mixed with several bastards. Every year, when I go to the ancestral grave to offer sacrifices, others use wine, but my family uses urine. My 8 generations of male ancestors were all eunuchs, and my 10 generations of female ancestors were all prostitutes. Fuck, my family is too bastard. Puff, puff, several law enforcement officers fell to the ground neatly, and all of them started to tremble. They had seen people who knew how to scold others, but they had never seen someone who scolded others so fiercely. They had never seen someone who scolded himself so fiercely, and he even scolded his ancestors. This family head Qian was really a talent. Family head Qian's cultivation was very high. How loud was his voice? It was so loud that even the deaf could hear it. Everyone could hear it. Everyone who heard it was stunned. He continued to curse and hit himself fiercely. As he hit and hit, he walked to his son's side and neatly twisted his son's neck off. He tore his son's head with force and twisted it off his son's head. Then, he tossed his son's head up, and with a flying kick, he kicked his son's head up into the air. With a swoosh, Qian Gong's head shot up like a rocket. Family head Qian leaped up, and with a whip kick in the air, his movements were very neat. Swoosh, his son's head flew away without a trace. Then, family head Qian landed on the ground, and patted his chest, waving his hands and shouting, Great! It's really great! It's so great to cut off this bastard's lineage! Ha ha! Then, he fell to the ground and cried, Son! I'm possessed! He actually woke up again. After waking up for a short while, he started to grab his own hair, gritting his teeth and scolding. You bastard! With a puff, he pulled out his own hair. He stomped his feet and scolded endlessly. He dug out his own eyeballs, and threw them into his mouth to chew. Then, with his left hand, he punched his own dantian heavily. At the same time, his right hand grabbed his own crotch. He roared, Cut off your lineage! Bastard! With a scream, family head Qian fell to the ground, convulsing and spasming. He was in extreme grief. I can't see. I can't see. What's going on? When he was doing these things, he knew clearly what he was doing in each of them. But he couldn't control his own hands and feet, and couldn't control his mouth. He killed his own son with his own hands. He blinded himself, castrated himself, and then destroyed his own cultivation. He was conscious throughout the whole process. This kind of fear was simply the culmination of the whole world. Moreover, he didn't understand what was going on from the beginning to the end. At the roadside, a middle-aged man was watching with his blood boiling. He couldn't help but shout, Great! It's really great! Cutting off this bastard's lineage is simply incomparably great! Ha ha! This sentence was the same as what family head Qian had said just now, but the meaning was very different. As he spoke, he suddenly picked up a saber from the ground, and rushed over without regard for his life. He chopped off family head Qian's head with his saber, and shouted crazily to the sky. I've taken revenge! I've taken revenge! Boo-hoo! I've taken revenge! Wife, daughter! I've taken revenge! Do you see it? Do you see it? He burst into tears like a child. After crying for a while, he suddenly lifted his saber, and used all his strength to chop and chop Clan Master Qian and his sons' bodies. He didn't stop until he had no more strength left. Then, he knelt down in front of Chu Yang's back, and repeatedly cowed out until his forehead was badly mutilated. Benefactor, thank you! Thank you! It's a pity that I can't repay you in this life. I will repay you in my next life! He didn't care whether Chu Yang could see it or not, and continued to cow out crazily. Then he stood up, and stabbed himself in the heart, and shouted, "Wife, take your daughter and walk slowly. I'm here to tell you the good news. I've taken revenge. I've taken revenge, ha!" Finally, he fell into a pool of blood silently. Everything was quiet as everyone watched the scene play out. Their eyes were filled with deep sympathy, as well as intense hatred for these clans. This man's 2 daughters were beautiful, but they were ruined in the hands of family head Qian. Because they resisted violence, they were sold to a brothel after being raped. They were not allowed to redeem their freedom, and the brothel did not charge them. They were like free prostitutes. Unable to bear the abuse, they committed suicide. His wife was filled with grief and indignation. Regardless of the difference in status, she went to seek justice. The next day, she was found hanging naked from a tree, and she was no longer breathing. This man had been doing business for generations, and his family was originally well off. But suddenly, he lost all his fortune, and his family was ruined. At this moment, seeing that family head Qian finally suffered retribution, he was so happy that his heart was about to explode. His heart was like dead ashes, and he had nothing to live for. He lived only to take revenge, to see justice. Now that his wish was fulfilled, he stabbed himself in the heart, and there was a sincere smile of satisfaction on his face. Chapter 943. Chu Yang, who was fighting, let out a long howl. With his divine sense, how could he not see it? Although he did not understand what story this man had, he knew that it must be extremely painful. Otherwise, he would not have committed suicide at this time. For a moment, he did not know what to feel. With a loud howl, his long sword was like the wind, ruthlessly cutting melons and vegetables. Chu Yang's long sword slashed out like a madman. There were less than 50 people left. Heads rolled and fell. They were all killed by him in a breath's time. More than 10 people fled in panic. But under the surveillance of Chu Yang's divine sense, where could they escape to? He killed them one by one with a sword and kicked their heads back with a kick. The heads piled up into a pile. He flew to the front of that man. With one look, he could not help but let out a long sigh. There was no pain on his face. There was only endless joy, relief, and happiness. In fact, there was even longing. Chu Yang stood quietly for a long time. In the voices of the distant crowd, Chu Yang captured the life of this man: generations of business, wealthy family, virtuous wife, beautiful daughter. Such a family that everyone envied had now reached such a stage. Such an honest man, without any cultivation, had only used a knife to kill a *** in his life? But now, he could brazenly grab a big knife and cut off people's heads. An ordinary man could also kill when he was angry. But such anger, such killing, how much hatred did he have to accumulate? How much grievance could not be vented, so that he could suddenly explode at such a juncture? To do such a thing, how much did he have to bear? He could not bear it. Can I let such a person bear it no longer? Chu Yang stood quietly in the midst of this bloody scene. But he felt that his heart was getting more and more angry and depressed. In just a short time today, he had already killed 300 to 400 people like this. But how big was the upper 3 heavens? How many people like this were there? Could he kill all of them? These were just a few small clans, and they were already like this. So what if they were big clans? How could a dandy be called a dandy if he did not have a clan or powerful strength? The bigger the clan of a dandy, the more powerful he was, and the bigger the area of disaster he could cause. A landlord in a village could occupy a few places, not to mention a big clan like this. If the area of this kind of clan was a town, then the area of the disaster caused by the silk pants would be a town. The bigger it was, the greater the area of disaster. This was a matter of the boat rising with the tide. Could he kill them all? Chu Yang looked at the middle-aged man lying on the ground. His mouth was tightly closed. He clenched his teeth and said, "Even if I can't kill them all, I still have to kill them. If I see one, I'll kill one." Even if the sin of murder haunted him, and he turned into a demon, he still had to kill. I won't show any mercy. He suddenly turned his head and shouted, Everyone, these bastards are here now. If anyone has been bullied by them, you can take revenge with your own hands. No matter what, it was fine. Don't worry, no one will dare to take revenge on you. The crowd was in an uproar. Everyone's face was filled with longing. Really? One of them asked with a trembling voice. He seemed to want to rush out, but he also seemed to be afraid. It's true. Chu Yang nodded vigorously. Then, he stretched out his hand and pointed. These people who have died here can testify. I'm not just making empty promises. The man wept tears of joy, and suddenly cried out, Revenge! Kill these bastards! He rushed out crazily. This shout was like a bugle call for an all-out attack. The crowd that was originally hesitant rushed forward like a tide. Everyone's face was filled with joy. The few fops who were tied up screamed in horror and begged for mercy. However, their pleas were immediately drowned out. Chu Yang realized that among the crowd that rushed forward, the craziest ones were actually women. Countless women with bone-deep hatred pounced forward like female wolves. They even squeezed the men to one side. They bit with their teeth, tore with their hands, and used their sharp nails to cut their flesh. Then, they bit them fiercely and tore them fiercely. The few dukes and their attendants were almost drowned in an instant. In the distance, there were still people shouting crazily, Revenge! Heaven has opened its eyes! Those bastards from the Qian, Sun Li, and Zhao clans have finally received their retribution. Someone come quickly! Wang Ernio! Wang Ernio! Go quickly, go quickly! Everyone, run quickly! We won't make it if we're late. Rumble. The crowd rushed in crazily from both sides of the street like a tide. Some of them knew that they wouldn't be able to snatch the goods, so they ran away. They went home to get money and then went to the shops to buy firecrackers. Then, they picked them up and set them off along the way. Smoke filled the air. More and more people went to buy firecrackers. Some even rode horses to buy firecrackers as fast as they could. A boss selling firecrackers simply placed all the firecrackers at the door. I'm so happy today! I don't want money! Just set them off! In an instant, the crowd in the square surged. Firecrackers sounded from all directions. Everyone was crying and laughing. Their faces were full of tears. Their faces were full of joy. The few fops in the center were besieged like this. They didn't even have time to scream before they were bitten to death. Mouthful after mouthful of flesh was bitten off. It was a horrible sight. It wasn't that good and evil didn't go unpunished. It was just that the time hadn't come yet. When the time came, it would be like this. The more evil you did, the more miserable you were now. Sun Qingkai and the others hurried over. The scene was already like this. Stop! Zhou Yade roared. But the crowd ignored him and continued to busy themselves. Where's the special envoy? Zhou Yade finally saw a law enforcement officer in black standing at one side. He flew over and asked. At the same time, another voice asked, Are you from the Sun clan? Sun Qingkai looked up and saw a young man in black with a blood-stained sword. He flew up and looked at Sun Qingkai coldly. Sun Qingkai's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly smiled apologetically and said, Yes, yes. May I know who you are? The young man in black flew up and said coldly, Who am I? Ask your son. He flew over like lightning. Sun Qingkai came here to save his son. But the situation in front of him was so chaotic that he couldn't find his son. Just as he was muttering in his heart, he saw that the other party had already come over. Shocked, he hurriedly retreated and shouted, Special Envoy, this is a misunderstanding. This is a misunderstanding. The three elders behind him said at the same time, Special Envoy, please show mercy. Chu Yang's face was cold. How would he show mercy? With a clang, he cut Sun Qingkai's sword into two and slashed at his face. Sun Qingkai panicked and shouted, Special Envoy, for the sake of the Diwu clan and the Zhuge clan. Chu Yang sneered. Not even for the sake of the Heavenly Emperor. The long sword fell down fiercely. The three elders stepped forward at the same time. They each drew out their long swords and fought with Chu Yang. Chu Yang laughed loudly. Kill! Suddenly, his long sword changed and turned into a sword radiance. With a cold murderous aura and an ancient desolation, he shouted, The world of mortals is the path of ruthlessness. Clang! 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 The three elders of the Sun clan, who were 8th stage martial monarchs, retreated continuously. Everyone's body was trembling violently. They looked at each other in disbelief. The long swords in their hands were already full of holes. The light in front of them was dazzling. Chu Yang turned into a shooting star with his sword and rushed over madly. Don't restrain your sword after killing the whole world! Screams sounded. The three elders tried their best to stop Chu Yang, but they couldn't. The next moment, 3 heads flew up into the sky. Chu Yang had already turned around and rushed towards Sun Qingkai. Sun Qingkai stumbled and his face was full of despair. He originally wanted to plead for mercy today. But he didn't expect that Chu Yang wouldn't even allow him to speak. Chu Yang directly raised his sword and killed. Instantly, his soul left his body. His heart was full of grievances. You can let me say a few words. If you don't even give face to the Zhiga clan, who are you going to give face to? Suddenly, his heart brightened. He rushed towards Zhou Ye desperately. Brother-in-law! Brother-in-law! Save me, save me. Seeing him rushing over, Zhou Ye was really like seeing a snake. Mother! You're still looking for me at such a time. He hurriedly stepped back and shouted. Stop him! Stop him for me! Sun Qingkai shouted crazily. Zhou Ye, you bastard! You've been eating and drinking my food for so many years. Now you don't care anymore. When did we not give you half of the property that we snatched? Which one of the beautiful women that we snatched didn't let you play with them first? You. Now you actually want to wash your hands of this matter? Zhou Ye was furious. He was frightened, panicked, and furious. Nonsense. Nonsense. You're talking nonsense. I'm a law enforcement officer. When have I ever done such things? Don't make false accusations. Sun Qingkai laughed miserably. You bastard, you still dare to say. Say it yourself. Where did your 37 concubines come from? They were all snatched by the Sun clan for you. You motherfucker, your concubines are constantly changing. The previous batch was sold to the brothel after playing with them enough. Our Sun family has done so many outrageous things for you, and now you're actually abandoning me. Do you still have a conscience? Your conscience has been eaten by dogs. Zhou Ye pulled out his long sword and rushed up crazily. Shut up. Damn it, shut up. Sun Qingkai didn't dodge the sword. He laughed wildly. Anyway, I'm going to die. I'll drag you down with me. Damn it. The long sword flashed coldly and Sun Qingcai's head fell off. But it wasn't Zhou Ye who did it. It was Chu Yang. Chu Yang stood in front of Zhou Ye with a murderous look. You're the law enforcement hall master? Zhou Ye was scared out of his wits. Sir, I really didn't do those things. Chu Yang looked at him coldly. I don't care whether you did it or not. I'm only telling you to immediately lead your subordinates and kill all of these 5 clans. If the dog is still alive, I'll take your dog life. Zhou Ye was relieved. Yes. I'll do it right away. Thank you for sparing my life. Chu Yang's eyes secretly flashed a ruthless cold light. He waved his hand. Do it quickly. You don't have much time. If you don't do it at the fastest speed, it's hard to say whether your head is on the ground or on your neck. Zhou Ye nodded like a chicken pecking rice. Yes. He turned around and shouted anxiously. Gather. Go and kill. Chapter 944. The sound of firecrackers filled the air. Immediately, the sound of firecrackers rang out from other places in North Windtown. Countless people were crying, and countless people were laughing. Countless people knelt down and kowtowed to Chu Yang. countless people ran to inform those who hadn't received the news yet. Slowly, the whole town boiled over. In the distance, the Li clan was set ablaze and black smoke rose. Immediately, the Qian clan was also set ablaze. After a while, the Zhao clan and the Jing clan were also set ablaze. In the end, black smoke also rose from the direction of the Sun family. The whole North Wind town was like the end of the world. But the emotions of the people were intense and excited. They shouted at the top of their lungs. They didn't even know what they were shouting for. Chu Yang walked out with Zi Xiecheng. Wherever he went, the people followed. They didn't speak and just looked at Chu Yang with fanatical eyes. This kind of gaze made Chu Yang feel sad. What kind of bullying and oppression did they go through to make these very ordinary people erupt like this at such a moment? Only then would these women be able to use their teeth to tear these young thugs into pieces. Wherever Chu Yang went, the people silently made way for him. Finally, Chu Yang stopped and turned around. He said loudly, "Everyone, don't follow me anymore. I killed these people because firstly, they deserved it. Secondly, they provoked me first. You don't have to be grateful to me. Go home." The crowd was silent. No one spoke. Chu Yang said it twice more. An old man with white eyebrows and beard shakily walked out of the crowd. He walked to Chu Yang and bowed deeply. Then, he straightened his back and said sincerely, "Sir, no matter why you killed them, you're our benefactor. We have been waiting for them to provoke someone they can't afford to provoke so that you can punish them. We are just ordinary people. We only have this kind of hope. And we can't do it ourselves. Now, sir, you have killed them, no matter what the reason is. You have always killed them. This is our common wish. And sir, you have eradicated all evil and directly destroyed the 5 big clans." As the old man spoke, tears flowed out of his eyes. He wiped them with trembling hands. "Thank you. My 2 flower-like granddaughters can finally rest in peace." As he spoke, he could no longer hold back his emotions and burst into tears. The entire street was filled with cries. Chu Yang heaved a long sigh. He felt as if something was surging in his chest. He raised his head and did not speak for a long time. In the beginning, when Zi Xiecheng suggested this method, he felt that it would kill too many people, and the punishment would be too heavy. Furthermore, with his cultivation level, killing some small fries was beneath him. However, he had forgotten how much harm the small shrimps in his eyes could cause to ordinary people. He could ignore it, but if ordinary people were bullied, they would have nowhere to redress their grievances. At this moment, he agreed with Zi Xiecheng's words, "Kill those who should be killed. Evil must be eradicated. Evil must be eradicated." After a long while, the sound of galloping horses' hooves was heard. Zhou Yade came back, covered in blood. He was gone for a total of 5 hours, mobilizing all the local law enforcers, uprooting the 5 great clans. But when he walked back, his heart was still uneasy. He knew that he would definitely be punished, but he could not escape. The other party had the command token of the law enforcement master. As long as the command was given, all the law enforcers in the world would hunt him down. He had to come back. And he also felt that he had atoned for his crime by killing so many people for him. At this moment, Zhou Yade indeed swore in his heart, "I will never be an evil person again. I will never do evil again. If I can escape with my life this time, I will definitely turn over a new leaf and become a new person. Special envoy! I, Zhou Yade, have completed my mission and have specially come back to report." Zhou Yade stood straight in front of Chu Yang. The surrounding crowd looked at him, their eyes full of disdain and hatred. Zhou Yade felt as if there were thorns on his back, and the muscles all over his body were slowly twitching. Chu Yang looked at him lightly and said, "I heard that you are the brother-in-law of the Sun clan? The uncle of those 2 fellows? I heard that you are involved in many of the things that they have done." Zhou Yade knelt down. "I deserve to die. But I dare not do so in the future." He pulled out his knife and chopped off 3 of his fingers. He raised his hand and swore, I, Zhou Yade, swear to the heavens in the name of the Calamity Sword that I will turn over a new leaf and become a new person. If I go against it, I will be struck to death by lightning. An oath made by the Calamity Sword was the most important oath in the heavens. Chu Yang raised his head and looked at the white clouds floating in the sky. He said sadly, "If you do bad things and kill people, you only need to swear and chop off a few fingers, and become a new person. Haha, those people that you have killed will never have the chance to become a new person again." Zhou Yade was sweating profusely. He heard Chu Yang ask, "How many good girls have you persecuted all these years? How many innocent people have you killed?" Zhou Yade's eyes were covered with sweat. He didn't dare to speak. After a long time, he said, 500 women, and 1,700 to 1,800 people. Chu Yang looked at him lightly. "You said that you are repentant. I can see from your eyes that you are indeed repentant. In your heart, you really want to be a good person. But if you want to live, do you think that the 500 women that you have destroyed and the 1,700 to 1,800 people that you have innocently killed will agree?" Zhou Yade knelt on the ground and didn't dare to speak. Chu Yang's voice gradually became louder. "You have been an evil person for a generation. Now you think that you will be fine just by saying that you are repentant? Then, everyone in the heavens can go and do evil. After you have done it, as long as you can sincerely say that you are wrong, then, won't you no longer need law enforcement officers?" Zhou Yade kowtowed and cried bitterly. "If you are wrong, you have to pay the price." Chu Yang looked at him coldly. "Do you want to end it yourself, or do you want me to do it?" Zhou Yade was disheartened. He stood up and said in a low voice, "I will end it myself." He looked up to the sky and laughed. "After doing something wrong, you want to end it just by saying that you are repentant. How can there be such an easy thing?" He suddenly turned around and pointed at them one by one. You. He pointed at 30 to 40 people and laughed. "Since the special envoy wants me to do it, and all of you have been following me and have done so many bad things, now, you can leave with me." He suddenly pulled out his sword and rushed forward. Chu Yang's gaze shifted to another person. He was looking at the warrior from the Zhuge clan who had led him here previously, Tao Ren. Tao Ren nodded slowly and discreetly. He told Chu Yang that Zhou Yade didn't kill the wrong people and didn't use this opportunity to drag others down with him. Chu Yang smiled. Zhou Yade had already killed all these people. He was covered in blood and said, "If saying that you are sorry can end it, then why do we still need law enforcement officers?" He laughed and suddenly raised his sword. With a fierce slash, he chopped off his own head. Chu Yang's eyes were calm and unmoved. "You have done too many evil things in the past and harmed so many people. Even if I know that you are truly repentant and will become a saint in the future, I will still kill you. I will still kill you. Because there are thousands of wrong souls who can't rest in peace." Looking at the flames that rose into the sky, Chu Yang instructed, "Who is the deputy of the law enforcement hall?" A burly man stepped forward and said with a strange expression, "He was killed by Hall Master Zhou just now." Chu Yang made a nose sound and said, "Then, you will be in charge of distributing the wealth of these clans to the common people. The things that have been robbed will be returned to their original owners." That burly man replied loudly, "Yes, Special Envoy." Chu Yang said lightly, "You know what to do, right? After the medicine banquet ends, I still have to leave from here." The burly man stood at attention. "I know. I definitely won't go against the Special Envoy's orders." He paused for a while and said, "But you have to be careful too. This Sun clan is related to the Diwu clan by marriage. If Diwu Qingyan knows about this, he might find trouble with you." Chu Yang smiled lightly and said, "Diwu Qingyan. What is his position in the Zhuge clan now?" "He's a warden in the Zhuge clan. He has quite a lot of power." The burly man said, "Diwu Qingyun is in charge of most of the external affairs of the Zhuge clan." "Oh? Then, what about Diwu Qingru?" Chu Yang raised his eyebrows. "Lord Qingru. Lord Diwu Qingru is the most important person in the Diwu clan. Even in the Zhuge clan, he's also the core think tank. The burly man actually revealed a solemn expression. If Lord Diwu Qingru interferes, you will really be in big trouble. Chu Yang laughed and said, "It's okay." He thought, if Diwu Qingru interferes, will I really be in big trouble? Thinking of this, he really couldn't make up his mind. If I meet Diwu Qingru in the upper three heavens, will we be enemies or friends? The next morning, when Chu Yang left North Wind Town, he realized that the streets were already crowded with people. They watched as Chu Yang left. A few painters were quickly drawing Chu Yang's appearance, and then they distributed it to everyone. Everyone took over the paintings with great care, as if they were receiving priceless treasures. After they went back, they pasted incense on the wall and burned 3 incense sticks in the morning and evening to erect a longevity tablet for their benefactor. They prayed day and night for their benefactor to live a long life. Chu Yang walked for a long distance. When he looked back, there were still quite a number of people kneeling. The sound of sobbing could be heard everywhere. Sometimes, I feel very strange. I don't feel that I've done anything, Chu Yang said somewhat sadly. Xi Xiecheng said lightly, "It's precisely because you don't feel that you've done anything that these people will remember you. Then, they will be grateful to you. If you had the thought of repaying their kindness at the beginning, you definitely wouldn't have received such treatment now." Xi Xiecheng said somewhat sadly, "Actually, in this world, most people just want to lead a peaceful life." Chu Yang let out a long breath. The 3 of them walked all the way. When they were 100 miles away, the escorts of the Zhuge clan along the way had already changed twice. At this moment, there was a lot of dust behind them. A group of people caught up from behind. The person in front shouted, "Are the people in front the bane of fops, the killer of perverts?" Chapter 945. Chu Yang was speechless. Since when did he have such a nickname? Foppish tyrant's nemesis sounds better, but what's with the ghost killer? Am I a ghost or a ghost killer? Chu Yang stopped and took a look. He saw a group of people in snow-white robes and a chilly aura. Hundreds of people walked over silently. Their robes were as white as snow and their swords were like silver. Chu Yang's pupils shrank. These people did not need to speak. Just by looking at them, Chu Yang could feel the chilly aura coming from them. And every one of them was an expert. The weakest among them was a monarch-level expert. There were many martial saints. And the few people walking in the middle of the group looked very young. But with every step they took, it was as if the whole world was moving along with them. This was the realm of Greater Virtual Realm. Supreme Martial Artist. And the 2 people at the front were a man and a woman. The man was handsome and the woman was beautiful. The man's face seemed to be filled with inexplicable sorrow. And the woman's face also seemed to never smile. Just by looking at her, one could tell that she was unapproachable. And this woman, Chu Yang actually knew her. Ling clan. Ling Han Shui. It seemed that these people were from the Ling clan, one of the dominant clans in the heavens. Xi Xiecheng was also looking at these few people. She looked at the man who was walking in front and said in admiration, "This man should be less than 50 years old. I didn't expect him to have the cultivation of a 7th-grade martial saint. Although there are traces of him forcefully using medicine to raise his cultivation, it's still very rare for him to have such cultivation at such a young age. He can be said to be an unparalleled genius." Chu Yang was stunned. "So high? I'm definitely not wrong," Xi Xiecheng said lightly. "This woman is also only 28 years old. But she's already a first-stage martial saint. Her aptitude is not inferior to that man's at all. But it's a pity that she's actually trained in Heartless. This kind of martial art is faster than any other martial art. But once you fall in love, you'll be doomed eternally. How did such a beautiful woman at such a young age learn such martial arts?" Chu Yang's heart shook. He remembered Ling Hanshue's indifferent attitude back at the Lake of Despair. She did not care about anything at all. There was also a moment of extreme pain in her eyes. If one's heart isn't as dead as ashes, who would seal their heart? Chu Yang sighed and said. Zi Xiecheng murmured. You are right. If one's heart is not dead and there is no more hope, who would seal their heart and be heartless? As she said that, she could not help but ask herself, am I considered heartless? While they were talking, those people had already arrived. The man in the lead, who was as handsome as jade, smiled and said, You must be Duke Chu, the one who has killed and enforced justice on behalf of the heavens? Linghan Shui, who was standing at the side, looked at Chu Yang's face with an icy gaze. She said with some surprise, It's you. She had seen Chu Yang at the Three Heavens Lake of Despair before. He didn't expect to see him here again. My surname is indeed Chu. Chu Yang smiled and replied, Miss Ling, we meet again. Linghan Shui said lightly, I remember that your name is Chu Yang. Aren't you in Three Heavens? Why are we in the upper Three Heavens? After the battle on that day, the heavenly layer was sealed. How did you come up? Why? Although she sounded like she was asking, the feeling that she gave off was still as cold as ice. Although Chu Yang knew her temper, he was still a little unhappy. He said, Miss Ling must have remembered wrongly. After the battle, the upper Three Heavens was sealed for more than half a month. Linghan Shui replied with a no and said, Then you must have entered within this half a month. I took it for granted. Her words were still cold, but she was apologizing. The man in white beside her smiled bitterly and said, Duke Chu, please don't be offended. This niece of mine is just like this. Sigh, even when she is talking to her father and me, she is still so cold. We can't do anything about it. Linghan Shui was a little angry. Second uncle. Chu Yang finally understood. This Miss Ling was still cold even when she was angry. And the person she was talking to now was her second uncle. It seemed that it was really caused by the heavens. Suddenly, he remembered something that Seventh Master Shao had said when he was fighting with Yi Wu Bing. At that time, Seventh Master Shao said, Am I wrong? Your sister Yi Chuchen was originally in love with Mengyin, a vassal clan of your Yi clan. But in order to form an alliance with the Ling clan, you forcefully separated the two of them. You wanted your sister to marry Ling Hanwu, the second duke of the Ling clan. Second duke? Second uncle? Wasn't the second duke of that time the current generation? Chu Yang remembered clearly that Seventh Master Shao even said, Yi Chuchen would rather die than submit. Mengyin was deeply in love with her. Ling Hanwu was still a man and took the initiative to withdraw. Could this man be Ling Hanwu? Chu Yang asked tentatively. Elder, you don't have to be so polite. I am indeed Chu Yang. May I know how to address you? The white-robed old man smiled faintly. Although he was smiling, there was a hint of worry between his brows that couldn't be erased. He said calmly, I am Ling Hanwu, Shui's second uncle. Chu Yang finally confirmed his conjecture. It's really this person. He couldn't help but be shocked. This person was Teacher's love rival. It was because of this person that Teacher's whole family was killed and he was left stranded in the lower Three Heavens. However, this Ling Hanwu was also innocent in this matter. Because he was completely unaware of the Yi clan's plans, he also took the initiative to withdraw in the end to allowing Shu Ran and Yi Chuchen to be together. He could be considered a man of character. Chu Yang's heart suddenly felt a little complicated. He smiled and said, So it's Second Master Ling. Then, he suddenly paused and said, Oh, something's not right. Ling Hanwu chuckled. My niece's name was changed by her teacher, so it became weird. It sounds as if she's of the same generation as us. But she's a girl after all, so it doesn't matter. Actually, my niece's original name was Ling Yuruo. Her name wasn't given according to her seniority, haha. Chu Yang said with relief. I see. Ling Hanxue said coldly. Second uncle, you'd better not bring me along when you talk to others. Ling Hanwu didn't take it to heart and laughed. Little Shui, be good. I'm just saying. Ling Hanxue frowned and walked to one side. Ling Hanwu laughed and said, Is Duke Chu also going to participate in the medicine banquet? Why don't we travel together? Chu Jiang said. If that's the case, thank you very much. We don't have many people, so there's really a lot of trouble along the way. Ling Hanwu smiled and said, However, you've also killed a lot of people along the way. Do you know, ever since you killed the first ebochi, I've instructed people to pay attention to your movements. After that, every time you killed someone, there would be an eagle message to me. As he said, he took out a piece of paper from his bosom, dipped it in his saliva and counted it. Then, he laughed and said, Good fellow! You've killed a total of 70 people along the way. And this doesn't include the 5 people you killed yesterday. Chu Yang smiled and said, With a sword in hand, I'll kill all the evildoers in the world. Good! Ling Hanwu shouted and repeated this sentence twice. With a sword in hand, I'll kill all the evildoers in the world. With a sword in hand, I'll kill all the evildoers in the world. Suddenly, he shouted, Bring the wine! Just for this sentence, I'm going to drink 3 cups of wine for you. You and I don't know each other, but for you to say this sentence, I like it. I'm pleasing to the eye. The group had already stopped. A white-robed man came over with a wine bag and 2 wine bowls on a tray. I'll do it personally. Ling Hanwu stopped that person from pouring the wine. He personally poured 2 cups of strong wine from the wine bag and held up a bowl. Chu Yang! Come, let's drink this cup of wine. Chu Yang smiled from the bottom of his heart. Good! Without being pretentious, he held up the big bowl and drank all the wine. Ling Hanwu looked at him with shining eyes and laughed. Good! Refreshing! Again! The 2 of them held up the wine bowls and drank 3 bowls in a row. They looked at each other and laughed at the same time. Refreshing! Ling Hanwu said. You've killed these people well. And the way you killed them is even better. I like it. Chu Yang smiled bitterly. He rubbed his nose and looked at Zi Xieching. He thought, so this guy actually admires such methods so much. In your generation, there's another person like this. As long as he sees someone who bullies others, he will definitely kill them quickly. That person is also the person I admire the most in the younger generation. He's the flower protector, Meng Hanwu. Chu Yang made an o's sound and thought, I can totally guess this. Ling Hanwu held up the wine bowl and said in a reminiscing tone, When I was young, I was also like all of you. Alone and with a sword, I roamed the martial world and killed young ruffians. For 10 years, I killed a total of 1,300 of them. 1,300 of them who bullied others and bullied others. Not including their subordinates. Chu Jiang calculated in his heart and said, Then you've killed at least 10,000 people. 10,000 ruffians. Ling Hanwu shook his head. No, there were many clans that were wiped out by me. In those 10 years, I killed at least 30,000 people. At that time, as long as I heard about it, I would take the initiative to kill them. If they didn't comply, I would kill their entire families. He smiled bitterly. In those 10 years, I was called the cold-blooded butcher. Sometimes I would travel 1,000 miles in a day and kill 3 clans in a row. It was only when the clans sent people to capture me that I stopped killing. Chu Yang laughed and probed. Elder, did you suffer any injuries at that time? Ling Hanwu's eyes widened, as if he was about to fly into a rage. Then, he smiled bitterly. Everyone knows that I, Ling Hanwu, suffered no injuries. Why do you have to probe? That's right, I did it for Sister Yi Chuchen of the Yi clan. Chu Yang's heart thumped heavily. After saying that, Ling Hanwu fell into a daze. His face was filled with reminiscence, frustration and bitterness. He shook his head and said, What's the use of being deeply in love? What's the use of being laughed at by the world? A woman's heart is not with you. No matter how powerful you are, you can't snatch it away. So, those who force women should be killed the most. Killing even their ancestors is the best. Letting them see the regret of not having any descendants is the real punishment. That's what's satisfying. Thank you to AXHHG, Alliance Master, for the 4th time. YYYHHY, you've done a lot for me this month. Thank you very much. Thank you to Long Yingwe, Alliance Master, for the tip in the wee hours. Thank you. Thank you to Lu Jinyo, Alliance Master, for the tip in the wee hours. When I opened the book review section and saw it, I felt really warm in my heart. Especially that sentence, "I'll treat you to a drink." It warmed my heart for a long time. Thank you to Weasel22 for the tip in the wee hours again. Thank you to Wei Chincho Ben Fong Lan, Become God or Crazy Demon McDull, for the tip. Chapter 946. Chu Yang was full of praise for this sentence. He said, "That's right. What can they do when they do evil? It's just that their clans are supporting them. Without the power of their clans, these people's lives are worse than dogs. Every plebeian's lust is only lust at first, but because of the indulgence of their clans and the flattery of their subordinates, slowly it becomes a matter of course. If anyone says that there's actually a group of righteous elders behind these evil people, I'll spit on his face." Ling Hanwu clapped his hands and praised. "Well said. So to kill a playboy, we have to destroy his entire nest. Get rid of him from the root. Whoever is the playboy's protective umbrella, kill him." Chu Yang laughed heartily, feeling that these words were simply said to his heart's content. He said, "But why did you do that for those 10 years? Ling Hanwu laughed with a strong sense of self-mockery. He said, "You're not an outsider, so there's no harm in me telling you." The two of them walked forward with the group. Ling Hanwu ordered a white horse to be given to Chu Yang. The two of them rode side by side and talked along the way. On the other side, Zi Xieching and Ling Hanxue were also talking. Zi Xieching and Chu Le were together with Ling Hanxue. One had to admit that Zi Xieching was as cold as ice, unapproachable. Ling Hanxue was even more like an iceberg. When the two of them walked together, they attracted too much attention, but also froze many people. It was too cold. The conversation between the two of them was even more frighteningly cold. No matter whether it was their expressions, eyes or faces, they were all extremely cold. Although the content was ordinary, the tone was so cold that it could freeze people. "Miss, what's your surname?" Ling Hanxue asked coldly. Zi Xieching said lightly. The journey was tough?" Ling Hanxue asked. "Not bad," Zi Xieching said. "Many young ruffians? You made a move?" Ling Hanxue asked. "What do you think?" Zi Xieching asked coldly. "I can't tell your cultivation," Ling Hanxue said. "It's average," Zi Xieching said. The two of them were cold in their questions and cold in their replies, but they were never tired of it. It was as if they had found an opponent, or as if they were competing to see who could dispel the other's indifference first. Thus, the two of them chatted along the way. Those who rarely saw the two ice beauties talking were curious and moved closer to listen. However, when they heard it, they shuddered and tried to avoid it. Such cold words sent chills down the spines of those who heard it. They felt the bone-chilling cold of the 12th lunar month. Even the 4 supreme-level experts who had been acting as protectors along the way had also quietly distanced themselves from them. 2 female perverts. Everyone cursed inwardly. The 2 people at the front of the group were talking non-stop. The 2 of them had too many topics in common. "Why am I not an outsider?" Chu Yang was a little surprised. "Isn't this the first time we've met? How was he not an outsider?" Ling Hanwu smiled lightly and said, "After Meng Gain returned to the upper 3 heavens, the first thing he did was to look for me." Chu Yang's spirit shook. "My master? Where is he now?" "Humph!" Ling Hanwu said fiercely. "Little brat! If your master didn't tell me that he had a disciple like you, do you think I would treat you to a drink just because we met by chance? Do you think it's so easy to drink my wine?" Chu Yang was sweating profusely. He smiled bitterly and said, "I've been presumptuous. I thought we fell in love at first sight." "Love at first sight?" Ling Hanwu almost fell off his horse. His eyes were as wide as a bull's. "You're just like what your master said. You look simple and honest on the surface, but you're actually very cunning in your heart. I don't know whether to laugh or cry." "No, your master was wrong too. You don't look simple and honest on the surface either." Chu Yang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But those who have met me all say that I'm honest, pure and flawless, with a face full of sincerity, full of good fortune. Stop! Ling Hanwu broke out in cold sweat. Could it be that I've got the wrong person? Are you Chu Yang or Tan Tan? Chu Yang was finally sure that Ling Hanwu had really met his master, Meng Chaoran. Otherwise, he wouldn't know so clearly. Knowing that he was Meng Chaoran's younger brother didn't make things difficult for him at all. But even Tan Tan knew about it. Where's my master now? Chu Yang asked anxiously. I killed him! Ling Hanwu rolled his eyes. Chu Yang's face darkened. You really took it seriously? Ling Hanwu snorted. Do you believe that I'll smack your butt on behalf of your master? Chu Yang said lightly. I don't like to joke, especially when it comes to my master. The two of them stared at each other without blinking. Ling Hanwu finally sighed. All right, I'll take it that I'm afraid of you, master and disciple. I won't joke about your master. Seeing Chu Yang's determination now, it was as if he saw Mengyin standing in front of him, as stubborn and unyielding as before. Chu Yang broke into a smile and said, In everyone's life, there are always a few people who can't be violated, who can't be ridiculed, who must be protected even at the cost of his life. And these people are usually called the person's bottom line. As the saying goes, a dragon has a reverse scale. Touching it will make it angry. People with a bottom line. Ling Hanwu said softly. You all have such people in your heart. Then who are the people you can't insult the most? Chu Yang said proudly. My master, my parents, my brothers, my woman. He smiled lightly, his eyes revealing a sharp determination. Whoever dares to offend them will die without a doubt. So many. Ling Hanwu laughed bitterly. Apart from my family, there's only one person I can't offend. But that person still doesn't belong to me. When I mention her, I can only use her to describe her. I can't use the word mine. Chu Yang was silent. He knew that he was talking about Yi Chuchen, but Chu Yang didn't want to say anything about this. Because that was his master's beloved. Chu Yang was rather curious. That Yi Chuchen. What kind of woman was she? She actually made these two men go crazy for her. Meng Chaoran was calm and composed. Even if the heavens collapsed, he might not be moved. And Ling Hanwu, as the second duke of a dominant clan, was above everyone else. How revered was his status. And yet, he was so infatuated with Yi Chuchen. Back then, your master, Chuchen, and I grew up together. I was the same age as your master, and Chuchen was younger than both of us. At that time, the Ling clan and the Yi clan were on very good terms, and they were even in-laws. My aunt was the wife of the Yi clan master. I often went over to play, and when I did, I would stay for a few months. Everyone slowly grew up, and I also fell in love with Chuchen. One day, when my family told me that they wanted to arrange a marriage for me, I mentioned Chuchen's name without hesitation. Only then did I know that it was the Yi clan who brought up this matter. I went to the Yi clan ecstatically, found Chuchen and told her about it. But I saw that she had lost a lot of weight. She told me that the person she liked was not me, but Mengyin. At that time, I really wanted to kill Mengyin, but Chuchen begged me to let them go. I, Ling Hanwu, am also a proud person. How could I accept a woman who didn't like me to be my wife? The whole world knew that I was deeply in love with Yi Chuchen. But she was in love with Mengyin, and didn't care about me at all. Even if I forcefully got her, what was the use? So, I gave up. Ha ha. Ling Hanwu laughed loudly, but his voice was full of desolation. Then, he laughed bitterly and said, But after I gave up that time, I knew that the pain was unbearable. Only then did I know what it meant to be heartbroken. I wandered aimlessly in the martial world, not knowing what I was doing. Then I heard that the Yi clan was furious because of this matter. The Yi clan master forced his daughter to agree, but Chuchen would rather die than comply. Because of this, she actually committed suicide once. So I rushed back to tell the Yi clan that I gave up on my own accord, and it had nothing to do with them. But when I arrived, it was already too late. In order to cut off Chuchen's thoughts, the Yi clan actually mobilized an army to besiege the Meng clan. Chuchen knelt in front of me and begged me to save Mengin. So I went. But with my strength alone, who could I save? By the time I arrived, the entire Meng clan was already dead. Only Mengin was still alive, but the knife immediately fell on his neck. I used my identity as a member of the Ling clan and forcibly took Mengin away, but Mengin was still assassinated by them. I escorted Mengin to escape. Before I left, I let the two of them meet. I kept watch. At this point, Ling Hanwu laughed bitterly. My most beloved woman met her lover, and I, who loved her deeply, kept watch outside. Keep watch. Ha ha. Chu Yan sighed softly. This kind of feeling was probably what made one wish for death the most, right? As the second Duke of the Ling clan, Ling Hanwu put in so much effort to help the person he loved. This was extremely rare. Mengin escaped in the middle of the night and disappeared without a trace. Chuchen washed her face with tears and was heartbroken. At that time, I wanted to kill that old fool from the Yi clan. If he hadn't forced me, would this have happened? If I wanted to kill the person who forced Chuchen, I would have to kill her father. If I killed him, she would be sad, so I couldn't kill him. So, I went to kill others. I specialized in killing those who forced women. Every time I killed someone, I would think in my heart that I had killed that old bastard from the Yi clan again. So, the more I killed, the more energetic I became. Just like that, I killed for 10 years. And because of this, the relationship between the two clans also became awkward. Ling Hanwu laughed bitterly. I practiced with all my might, used all kinds of methods to improve myself, and tried to forget her. But in the end, I couldn't do it. I understand, Chu Yang said deeply. Your master has changed his name to Meng Chaoran, right? Ling Hanwu laughed. The moment he reached the upper three heavens, he came to find me and said bluntly, I want to see Yi Chuchen. Chu Yang didn't expect his master to be so direct and fierce. He was actually so direct in front of his love rival. Do you know what his second sentence was? Ling Hanwu gritted his teeth. What? Chu Yang asked. Chapter 947. But you still went to keep a lookout in the end. Chu Yang smiled and touched his nose. I did it for Chuchen. Do you think I did it for Mengin? Ling Hanwu almost jumped up in rage. He glared at Chu Yang. Your mouth is as hateful as your teacher's. In that case, the two of them have already met. Chu Yang was a little relieved. Ling Hanwu said angrily. Of course. What about now? Chu Yang asked tentatively. Are they still together? Still together? Ling Hanwu was furious. It's good enough that they've met once. You still want them to be together? Mengin has left. I don't know where he went. Yi Chuchen has gone home. Ling Hanwu obviously didn't want to talk about this topic. Every word he said about Meng Chaoran and Yi Chuchen being together was like a knife cutting his heart. In other words, they're fine? They weren't discovered? Chu Yang was relieved and beamed with joy. What nonsense! With me keeping a lookout, what can happen? Ling Hanwu almost vomited blood. No wonder. Chu Yang nodded. That bastard Mengin's cultivation isn't as good as mine. His family background isn't as good as mine. His looks aren't as good as mine either. But he's more popular with women than me, Ling Hanwu said gloomily. I've thought about this for 20 years and still can't figure it out. Chu Yang said sympathetically. I can't figure it out either. So until now you've been a bachelor? Ling Hanwu's face twisted. What do you mean by a bachelor? Junior, you should be more polite. I'm keeping my chastity for the sake of my love and never marry. Isn't that still a bachelor? Chu Yang rolled his eyes and muttered softly. Ling Hanwu rolled his eyes and changed the topic. Junior, are you going to the medicine banquet this time? I heard that you're a pharmacist? And a candidate chosen by Han Shaoran from the southeast? Chu Yang nodded conceitedly and said, I've promised law enforcement Master Han that I'll win first place in this medicine banquet. Ling Hanwu's face turned ugly. Win first place? Chu Yang smiled lightly. It's a small matter. Ling Hanwu looked at Chu Yang with eyes as big as copper bells. It looked like he wanted to swallow Chu Yang whole. Winning first place in one go was actually a small matter? You've got guts. Ling Hanwu nodded fiercely. Your teacher is right. You do have guts. Chu Yang chuckled and said, Uncle, I won't hide it from you. In my eyes, those pharmacists of your big clans are just like trash. This time, against those trash, the chances of winning can't be said to be 100%, but it's still 100% certain. Ling Hanwu's face turned purple. Like a good-for-nothing? Trash? Chu Yang smiled conceitedly and said, It's a little too much to say this, but it's true that I can't go that far. I reckon that my main opponent is the High Priest of the Medicine Valley, or rather. Speaking till here, Chu Yang sized up the Ling clan's team. Seeing that everyone in the Ling clan was wearing the same clothes, he really couldn't tell which one was the pharmacist. He asked, Uncle, who is the pharmacist of your Ling clan? Ling Hanwu was so angry that he laughed. The pharmacist of our Ling clan? That good-for-nothing guy? A piece of trash? Chu Yang laughed. Uncle, what are you talking about? Although he's definitely not as good as me, he can still handle normal situations. Ling Hanwu closed his eyes and took 2 deep breaths. Then, he opened his eyes and pointed a finger at his own nose. He said, The useless person of the Ling clan that you're talking about is me. Chu Yang's mouth opened wide and he couldn't close it. I'm that useless person! Ling Hanwu roared. His voice was a little loud and everyone heard it at once. In an instant, there was complete silence. Pairs of bewildered eyes looked over. They really didn't know what was wrong with their second master to call him a useless person so openly. Xi Xieching, who was talking to Ling Hanxue, couldn't help but laugh. With her cultivation, she naturally heard it clearly. Chu Yang was extremely embarrassed. He laughed and said, So it's Uncle. Cough cough, Uncle is really knowledgeable and well-versed in everything. Ling Hanwu glared at him. How can a useless person like me be considered knowledgeable and well-versed? Chu Yang laughed again. Actually, although it's autumn, it's still very hot. Haha. Uncle, your Ling clan has come really early this time, a whole half a year in advance? Ling Hanwu took a few breaths and couldn't help but laugh. Fuck your teacher! You're much more cunning than your teacher. Chu Yang grinned and said, The student surpasses the master. Everyone says so. Ling Hanwu shook his head and laughed. A good person can also fall ill from anger after talking to you for a while. Alright, let's not talk about this. There's naturally a reason why I'm here early. Chu Yang had a flash of inspiration. My teacher's wife will be here too? Ling Hanwu said angrily. Nonsense! We're not married yet. You can only call her Miss Yi. Chu Yang immediately followed his advice. Miss Yi will be here too? Ling Hanwu was still angry. Of course. Otherwise, why would I rush here? Then my teacher will definitely be here secretly. Chu Yang was happy. Thinking that he hadn't seen his teacher for a long time, he couldn't help but miss him. Ling Hanwu, however, was immersed in the past again. He murmured, When I was young, I often watched the snow with Chuchin. She likes snow, so do I. When I grew up, my biggest wish was to be able to watch the snow with her, just the two of us. Unfortunately, this wish has never been realized. I don't care whether the medicine banquet is a banquet or not. I also don't care about being the #1 doctor. I just want to use this opportunity to fulfill this wish of mine. Even if it's just standing together, not saying a word, and immediately going home after watching the snow, it's also good. Ling Hanwu said sadly. Chu Yang quietened down. At this moment, he really didn't know what to say. This guy coveted his teacher's wife, he should really kick him away. But at this moment, Chu Yang only felt sad. This infatuated man only wanted to watch the snow with the person he loved the most in his life. The sound of horse hooves was heard and the road was left behind. What exactly is this medicine banquet about? Chu Yang asked. The medicine banquet is a grand event of the heavens, Ling Hanwu said. It's held once every 1,000 years. And it's only held once every 10,000 years. The big clans hold it once. During the medicine banquet, all the big clans present all their elixirs to participate in the banquet. They refine 10,000 different elixirs into a special heaven-nourishing jade. The Dharma Supreme and 8 Supreme Martial Artist experts fill this heaven-nourishing jade into the missing parts of the heavens to stabilize the stability of the heavens. This is a rather sacred ceremony. Although it has gradually become a bit of a scramble for fame and fortune over the years, this purpose has never changed. Chu Yang nodded silently. I see. Then, what are the benefits of being the champion of the medicine banquet? There aren't any benefits, just the title of the #1 doctor in the world. Also, there will be a small piece of the heaven-nourishing jade left, and this small piece will belong to the champion. Other than that, he can take any 10 types of elixirs that appear in the medicine banquet. Of course, the most important thing is, the champion will receive a special honor, and that is the status of a law enforcement officer. A law enforcement officer's status is equivalent to that of a law enforcement master. Among the law enforcement officers, he's also extremely respected. With such a status, he can do whatever he wants in the heavens. Ling Hanwu sighed a little bleakly. But all these are meaningless to me. Chu Yang nodded silently and calculated these things. The effects of the heaven-nourishing jade must be extraordinary. Taking any 10 types of elixirs would also be a great temptation. These things would be a great supplement for Tribulation's sword. As for being a law enforcement officer's guest, that should be Han Xiaoran's biggest hope for him. If he became a law enforcement officer's guest, then Han Xiaoran's purge would be much smoother. After all, no one would want to offend the #1 doctor in the world, who hasn't been hurt before? As for being a law enforcement officer's guest, that was an even more noble status, Ling Hanwu muttered to himself. If anyone here can develop a medicine that can make a woman fall in love with a man wholeheartedly, I'll fight for a championship even if I have to risk my life. Sigh. Chu Yang sighed. Infatuation was very pitiful, especially when it was an unintentional infatuation between a man and a woman. Ling Hanwu, as the duke of a dominating clan, was impeccable in terms of appearance, talent, character, cultivation and family background. But he just had to fall in love with Yi Chuchen, who didn't like him. This was really a tragedy. As a doctor, you have to prepare a stock of elixir for the preliminary round of the medicine banquet. Ling Hanwu woke up from his thoughts and said, What kind of elixir have you prepared? This round is guarded by the Medicine Valley, and it's extremely strict. I'm afraid ordinary elixirs can't pass. There's such a thing? Chu Yang asked humbly. Then, what kind of elixir have you prepared? Ling Hanwu said. I've prepared it casually. It's an 8,000-year-old lotus of will. Although it's not very good, it's more than enough to enter the preliminary round. What about you? Chu Yang muttered. I only know about it now. I haven't thought of what to use. Ling Hanwu said angrily. Han Xiaoran is so irresponsible. He didn't prepare anything for you. As he said, he sighed and said, It's no wonder. Han Xiaoran has been upright and plain-spoken all these years, and he hasn't profited from anything. Just based on his poor appearance, he may not be able to come up with anything good. Forget it, I'll prepare one for you then. Chu Yang said. Thank you, uncle. But I have one here. I don't need to trouble you. Ling Hanwu looked at him helplessly and said, All right, if it doesn't work, I'll change it for you. He thought to himself, young people are thin-skinned. I'll just prepare one more for him. In the Juga clan, Diwu Qingru was pruning a stalk of osmanthus, looking carefree. Chapter 948. Diwu Qingru sighed. This brother of his didn't have much ability. He didn't practice martial arts, but he thought himself smart, and was good at currying favor. Relying on the identity of the Diwu clan, he became an external attendant of the Zhuge clan. Diwu Qingru had never liked this person, but Diwu Qingyun always came to discuss everything with him. And no matter what Diwu Qingru thought, Diwu Qingru would go out with Diwu Qingrou's name. It was really annoying. Sometimes, Diwu Qingru even wanted to just evaporate this little guy. But after thinking about it, he still didn't do it. The Diwu clan had already withered to such a state. If there were internal strife, it would really be beyond redemption. Moreover, the entire clan was covered by the supreme martial artist's divine senses from morning till night. It wasn't easy to be undetected. This time, he finally had some free time, and this guy came again. Diwu Qingru really didn't know what was bothering him this time. He had no choice but to say, "I'm here, come in." With a creak, Diwu Qingyun pushed open the door and entered. Diwu Qingru looked up and saw that Diwu Qingyun's face was full of anger. He couldn't help but frown. "What's the matter?" Diwu Qingyun said in a panic. "Qingru, something big has happened this time. Do you know my in-laws?" "The one from North Wind Town," Diwu Qingru said lightly. "The one with the surname Sun? What's wrong? What's wrong?" Diwu Qingyun sighed and said, "They were killed. Their whole family was killed. Not a single one was left alive," Diwu Qingru said lightly. "Oh?" Diwu Qingyun said. "It's said that the person who killed him has a strong background. And this time, he came here to participate in the medicine banquet. He was chosen by the law enforcement master of the southeast region, Han Shaoran." Diwu Qingru trimmed the osmanthus flowers patiently. He looked left and right, then stretched out his scissors and said lightly, "You want to take revenge? You want to avenge your in-laws?" Diwu Qingyun said. "No matter what, he's my in-laws. Moreover, once he's gone, it's equivalent to losing a source of income for me. How can I not take revenge?" "You want to take revenge, but you don't want to get into trouble. But the other party has a strong background, so you want me to give you an idea?" Diwu Qingrou's hands were very steady. His eyes were carefully observing the bouquet that needed to be trimmed, but his mouth was clearly analyzing. "That's right," Diwu Qingyun said anxiously. "Qingru, only you can help me this time. Only someone like you, who can devise strategies and divine schemes, can kill that little one without anyone noticing. Since he came to participate in the medicine banquet, he must be a doctor," Diwu Qingru said nonchalantly. "What's his name? What's his cultivation?" "This person is surnamed Chu. His name is Chu Yang. He is a sword." Before Diwu Qingyun could finish his sentence, a cracking sound was heard. Diwu Qingru had actually cut off an entire osmanthus flower. Then, the scissors fell to the ground with a thud. The expression on Diwu Qingrou's face was also very strange. There was shock, confusion, memories, disbelief, and even too much pleasant surprise. But in an instant it returned to its original state. "Qingru?" Diwu Qingyun was shocked. He dared to swear that he had never seen Diwu Qingrou's complexion change like today's. "I'm fine." Diwu Qingru bent down and picked up the scissors. But he didn't trim the bouquet anymore. Instead, he frowned and thought about something. He personally planted, cultivated, and reshaped the osmanthus flower that he had taken care of for so many years. But he didn't seem to care about it at all. Diwu Qingyun didn't dare to disturb him, so he stood aside and waited. Diwu Qingru thought for a while and threw the scissors away. He raised his hand and put it in front of his eyes, saying, "My hand is a bit too clean during this period of time. It's a bit slippery." Diwu Qingyun blinked his eyes in confusion. "Hand too clean? Will it be slippery if the hand is too clean?" Diwu Qingru looked at his hand for a while. Then, he slowly walked up and put his hands behind his back. His expression was indifferent. He didn't say a word for a long time. "Qingru, what should we do about this?" Diwu Qingyun said anxiously. "Give me an idea." Diwu Qingru was about to speak, but he suddenly turned around and asked, "You said he's a sword. What sword?" "Sword Emperor." "It's said that he's a sword emperor." Diwu Qingyun was a bit flustered. His cultivation isn't low. And he's a special pharmacist envoy appointed by the law enforcement master of the southeast region. The corner of Diwu Qingrou's eyes twitched imperceptibly. He muttered, Sword Emperor? Sword Emperor. What's his cultivation? Diwu Qingyun was stunned. Qingru, are you confused? First, there's an emperor, then there's a monarch. After transcending mortality, one will become a saint. The sword is the most respected in the universe. This is the way of the sword. You. Are you pretending to be confused? Diwu Qingrou's eyebrows twitched slightly. He said, Oh, a sword emperor after the sword emperor. Great. His words were exceptionally forceful. Then, his expression returned to normal. He said calmly, This person is very young, right? What does he look like? Very young, definitely less than 20 years old. And he's very handsome. Diwu Qingyun said energetically. Very young, less than 20 years old, Sword Emperor. Great, Diwu Qingru said softly. His eyes finally lit up for real. At this moment, there seemed to be a star in Diwu Qingrou's eyes that shone intensely. Then, he smiled slightly. It's just a Sword Emperor. Don't tell me you can't deal with him? Diwu Qingyun was angry and anxious. If it's a normal situation, I'll find a few people and fake an order to mobilize the experts of the Zhuge clan. But now, it's the preparation period for the medicine banquet. All the experts have their own duties. I can't find a chance even if I find one. Diwu Qingrou's eyes lit up again. He said, If so, you can do this. He pondered for a moment and said, I think that this kind of thing can only be done by your own trusted subordinates. Diwu Qingyun stomped his feet and said, You're joking. The highest level among my trusted subordinates is a 5th stage monarch. I spent a lot of effort to win him over. But how can a 5th stage monarch deal with a 5th stage sword emperor? Diwu Qingru frowned and said, I have a plan. Say it. Diwu Qingyun became spirited. Such a young sword emperor must have borrowed the power of medicine. Diwu Qingru said slowly. That's right. Definitely. Diwu Qingyun said affirmatively. Otherwise, even if he started practicing when he was in his mother's womb, he wouldn't be able to reach this stage. That's right. Diwu Qingru said. All those who improve with the help of medicine are very sensitive to medicine. Such people are most afraid of poison. And this person is young, so he probably doesn't have much experience in the martial world. So? Diwu Qingyun looked at him eagerly. So, you're in charge of welcoming guests, and arranging their meals and lodging in the Zhuge clan. Diwu Qingrou's eyes flashed with a trace of coldness. He said, Which room he stays in, what food he eats, what wine he drinks, and what furniture he uses. You know all of them. They're all arranged by you. Do you understand? Understood. You mean you want me to poison him? Diwu Qingyun's eyes lit up. Poison must be done cleverly and without leaving any traces. It's best if it's a mixed poison. Diwu Qingru continued to give ideas. Yes. Diwu Qingyun nodded repeatedly. As a pharmacist, you can distinguish mixed poisons. So, if he comes, arrange for him to stay in the orchard palace. There are heavenly fragrant orchids there. They're blooming all year round and have a faint fragrance that can cover all the smell of poisons. Diwu Qingru paced 3 steps and said softly, Okay. Diwu Qingyun's eyes became brighter and brighter. Finally, give it to me after you find the mixed poison. I will use my 10,000 miles waft of fragrance, orchid's heart-chasing soul, to stimulate this mixed poison for you. This will make it even more thoroughly blend into the orchid fragrance. Diwu Qingru said softly. Great! Diwu Qingyun got more excited as he listened. Of course, you have to be careful. Don't use too much poison. If it's too heavy, it'll be easily discovered. It's best if the mixed poison can only make experts unconscious. Yes, the mixed poison of noon fragrance and orchid heart grass is the best. Diwu Qingru continued to give suggestions. Great! I happen to have such a mixed poison. Diwu Qingyun clapped his hands excitedly. If you don't have it, I won't tell you. Diwu Qingru thought to himself and continued. As long as he shows signs of instability after being poisoned, you'll take action immediately. Because this kind of poison can only make the Sword Emperor unconscious for 2 hours at most. You have to calculate the time well. Of course. Not to mention 2 hours, even if it's just a blink of an eye. I can chop off his head 8 times. Diwu Qingyun was relieved and laughed. Diwu Qingru said, You only want to kill? You don't want to vent your anger? Isn't it letting him off too easily if you just kill him with one strike? That's true. In your opinion, what should I do? Diwu Qingyun asked. Diwu Qingru smiled faintly and said, If I want to take revenge, I'll show myself and tell him my name, my identity, and what he did wrong. Then I'll let him beg for mercy. You'll pretend to agree, and when he's happy, you'll suddenly take his life. That's so satisfying. Diwu Qingyun clapped his hands and gave him a thumbs up. Qingru, you're really a think tank and an ancestor of scheming. Diwu Qingru's eyes flickered slightly and said, But you have to be careful now and do it secretly. Other than your closest and most trusted subordinates, don't let anyone else know. Otherwise, if the clan knows that you actually dared to murder a guest during the medicine banquet, you can only go back home and farm. Diwu Qingyun said with dissatisfaction. Look at what you're saying, I'm not stupid. Chapter 949. Well, you're indeed not stupid. Diwu Qingru's gaze was a little complicated. He looked at Diwu Qingyun and said softly, Qingyun, the Sun clan was killed because of their evil deeds. It's their retribution. He pondered for a while and said, And you? As far as I know, you've done a lot of evil deeds these years. Although you're not as evil as the Sun clan, you're still hated to the core. You should know that you'll be punished if you do too many evil deeds. It's okay if you give up this revenge. Diwu Qingru struggled to say these few words. It was slightly different from his usual smoothness. Diwu Qingyun laughed and said, It's okay. Qingru, I always do things through my subordinates. Besides, your little tricks are also very vicious. Every time I do something, you'll deal with my subordinates and kill them. That time, you even caught me and gave me 100 beatings. He smiled and said, But I like this. I won't blame you even if you beat me and kill my subordinates. You can find me again after you kill me. But this time, don't blame me, and don't stop me. My concubine is the youngest daughter of the Sun clan. She's crying and throwing tantrums at me. I can't take it anymore. If this goes on, I won't be able to live. So, I have to kill this person. Have to kill? Well, you have to kill him. Diwu Qingru nodded lightly and said softly, Since you have to kill him, then kill him. Of course I have to kill him. Diwu Qingyun snorted and said, Qingru, thank you for coming up with an idea for me this time. This time, that little girl is really dead. But I can't keep it a secret alone. You have to keep it a secret for me. If this spreads out, I'm really finished. Diwu Qingru nodded deeply and said, Don't worry, I'll be fine. Diwu Qingyun left in a relaxed manner. Only Diwu Qingru was left standing in his own courtyard in a daze. He stood for a long time before he sat down slowly. He picked up the teapot and poured himself a cup of tea. He took a sip and muttered, So fast. The tea is already cold. Then, he sighed softly and said, It's windy. Is the weather going to change? Then, he walked in slowly. He walked into his bedroom. Sitting in front of the desk, he muttered to himself, The array is going to be activated in advance? That blood-colored luck. He sighed deeply. Too fast. Diwu Qingru said softly. He quietly looked at the name list on the table. This was the name list of the Diwu clan. He flipped through it in his hands, and his gaze stopped at the name Diwu Qingyun. He sighed and looked at the other names. Then, he said softly, almost as if he was whispering, If that's the case, we have to clean them up thoroughly. Otherwise, when the sky changes, it will be too late. While Chu Yang and the others were constantly moving towards the south, Diwu Qingro was also making plans. On this vast continent, there were many people who were related to Chu Yang. And they were also advancing towards this place. There were many people that Chu Yang hadn't thought of. In the southeast direction, thousands of miles behind Chu Yang and the others, a handsome couple, who looked like an immortal couple, was leading a beautiful girl towards the south. Qianqian's cultivation should have been stabilized, right? Feng Yuro said with a smile. Wu Qianqian said, Yes, I feel that there are no fluctuations now. It's just that teacher has sacrificed too much for this matter. Yu Lingxue said with a faint smile. Our losses can be recouped with a seat. It's nothing. It's just that you're about to go out into the martial world for training. As a girl, you can't defend yourself without sufficient strength. Wu Qianqian said softly. Yes. Feng Yuro said. Qianqian, you're going to the medicine banquet this time. It's a good time for you to train. You have to be careful at all times. You must remember, once you meet those plebeians who are looking for trouble, don't be soft-hearted. Kill those who should be killed, don't be merciful. Once you're merciful, you'll be harming yourself. Yu Lingxue said with a faint smile. Rower, you're wrong. Our brother's methods are much cleaner than yours. Feng Yuro rolled her eyes at him and said, No matter how clean she is, it's her first time in the martial world after all. Yu Lingxue raised his hands in surrender. I'm wrong. Wu Qianqian smiled. After the first part, you can walk by yourself. Feng Yuro looked at Wu Qianqian lovingly. She took out a bracelet from her chest and put it on Wu Qianqian's wrist. She said, This is a piece of starwood. I've already refined it. I'll teach you how to use it. If you have anything in the future, just put it in here. When you need it, just take it out directly. Wu Qianqian's eyes reddened. Teacher, are you leaving? Qianqian, you still have to walk your own path. Feng Yuro said with a gentle smile. Your teacher you and I can't follow you forever. Your stormy life hasn't started yet. I'm just paving a path for you, but to really stand on top of it, you still have a long way to go. Yes, teacher. Wu Qianqian pursed her lips. The three of them walked forward for a while more before the three of them parted ways. Feng Yuro looked at Wu Qianqian's black figure drifting away and finally not looking back. Her eyes reddened. She said, I don't know why Qianqian likes black so much. She hasn't changed. Yu Lingxue looked at Wu Qianqian's back and said with a smile, This child has a good temperament. She only turned back once. When she turned back, she was smiling. When she turned back, she cried twice. This child just doesn't want us to worry. Feng Yuro asked. Are we really going to let her leave by herself? It's her first time in the martial world. We naturally have to follow her for a period of time and observe secretly. Yu Lingxue said. However, you mustn't do anything unless it's a critical moment. Once you give her a sense of dependence, her life will be over. Feng Yuro nodded. The two of them waited until Wu Qianqian was out of sight before they followed her quietly, but as they followed her slowly, the couple's eyes widened. This disciple of his was much stronger than he had expected. With Wu Qianqian's looks and figure, she was definitely one of the top 3 beauties in the entire heavenly realm. Along the way, she had attracted a lot of lascivious men. But no matter what, Miss Wu had been a minister before. She had taken over the position of the King of Hell Chu. Although she wasn't the real King of Hell, as long as she could act as the King of Hell, would there be anyone who would be merciful? They saw that Miss Wu adhering to the idea of eliminating evil. After walking for less than 300 miles, she had already slaughtered 3 slaughterhouses. Along the way, heads rolled and blood dripped. Miss Wu's expression didn't change. Like a breeze blowing through a pool of blood, Feng Yuro looked at Yu Lingxue in disbelief. Is this really our disciple? Yu Lingxue smiled bitterly. I heard that she had done the work of the King of Hell in the lower 3 heavens. Feng Yuro was surprised and didn't say anything. On the other side, from a high mountain, Bulu Qing and Mo Qingwu, who was dressed in red, were also coming down the mountain. It was Mo Qingwu's first time coming down the mountain. She was so happy that she danced. Since old man Ning isn't here, I'll bring you down the mountain to play. Bu Liuqing's words made Mo Qingwu excited for a few days. Today was finally the day to go out. Since coming to the upper three heavens, Mo Qingwu had grown a lot taller. The 12-year-old little girl had actually started to show her figure. The master and disciple went down the mountain and headed in the direction of the south. Bu Liuqing was calculating in his heart. He didn't know if there were any medicines that Mo Qingwu needed at the medicine banquet. If there were, he would take advantage of it. If there weren't, he would take advantage of the remaining heaven-nourishing jade. Even if that old bastard Ning Tianya ran until his legs broke, he wouldn't be as good as me. In this day and age, it was a competition of IQ. But there was only one problem that gave Bu Liuqing a headache. Master, do you think we'll meet Brother Chu Yang at this banquet? Mo Qingwu's face was full of anticipation. Not necessarily. This thing is mainly for pharmacists. Your brother Chu Yang is already good at practicing the sword. Can he be omnipotent? Bu Liuqing said. Then can we not go to this banquet? Let's go find Brother Chu Yang. Mo Qingwu suggested excitedly. Brother Chu Yang is much better than this banquet. It's also much more interesting. Bu Liuqing thought in his heart. Only you think that Brother Chu Yang is good-looking. I don't see what's so good about him. Interesting? What's so interesting about him? Other than that sharp tongue of his, I don't see anything interesting about him either. Bu Liuqing was depressed at the thought of this. Looking at this situation, would the little brother that he had painstakingly taught be taken advantage of by that bastard? That bastard is so much older than little Wu. He's a classic example of an old cow eating young grass. Please. Mo Qingwu started to act coquettishly. She pulled Bu Liuqing's hand and started to shake it. Bu Liuqing's face fell. He hurriedly changed his words. This medicine banquet is a grand event of the upper three heavens. It's so fun. Even if they're not pharmacists, they'll still go and watch the fun. Your brother Chu Yang will definitely go too. Ah! Long live! Mo Qingwu was elated. She urged repeatedly. Master, let's go quickly. The faster the better. Why don't you carry me? I'm not a donkey! Bu Liuqing was so angry that he almost scolded her. But he still said patiently. The medicine banquet will only start when the flowers bloom in spring. Let's walk slowly. If we go early, your brother Chu Yang will definitely not go. We'll also miss the scenery along the way. Mo Qingwu pouted. Okay. At this moment, in the distant upper three heavens, in the secret area of the Ao clan, Gu Duxing, Xie Danqiong, Mo Tianji, Ao Xianyun, GMO, Luo Kadi and the rest gathered together, facing the door of the secret room. Ao Xianyun asked. Is everyone ready? The brothers nodded. Ao Xianyun's face was solemn. Everyone, pay attention. Once the door opens, hurry up. He slowly took off his clothes, leaving only his underwear on. Suddenly, he raised his head and let out a long roar. This long roar reverberated and went straight into the clouds. It actually turned into a loud and clear dragon roar. Golden dragon scales suddenly appeared on Ao Xianyun's body. From dawn till now, I haven't slept at all. I've only slept 4 times. Even I'm surprised at how useless I am. It's as if there's a mountain pressing down on my heart. The outbursts this whole month are really hard to explain. Chapter 950. Dragon scales appeared. Ao Xianyun's muscles bulged. Dense dragon scales appeared from his ankles and then spread up his legs at an extremely fast speed. In a short while, they had reached his chest. Author's note, translated by Kyomura, edited by Elrianth. They continued to climb up. Neck, face, head. Slowly, his whole body was shining with a golden light. On his forehead, 2 protrusions were slowly growing, like 2 dragon horns breaking out of his skin. Ao Xianyun held his breath and let out a long and loud roar. He exhaled and shouted continuously. At this moment, he suddenly opened his eyes and shouted, Now! With a clang, Gu Duxing, who was already a 7th grade sword sovereign, drew his black dragon sword. With a flash of sword light, it reached Ao Shiyan's chest. At this moment, a dragon scale on Ao Shiyan's chest suddenly disappeared, revealing his heart. Gu Duxing did not hesitate. With a flash of sword light, it pierced into his chest. With a spin, he retracted his sword at lightning speed and retreated. Ao Shiyan looked up to the sky and screamed. A column of blood spurted out from his chest and fell into the mouth of the huge dragon statue in the secret ground. The next moment, this huge dragon statue, which was as tall as a dozen people, suddenly emitted a blazing red light, illuminating the entire secret ground in a red color. Soaring proudly, soaring across the sky, 10,000 years, first dragon transformation! A murmur of chanting sounded. The secret ground, which was tightly sealed, slowly separated into two sides. A round hole was revealed. The red light shone, but it was so deep that one could not see the bottom. Gu Duxing rushed forward and shouted, "Go in!" He grabbed Ao Shiyan's waist and rushed into the hole at lightning speed. Mo Tianji followed closely behind, and Xia Danqiong followed closely behind. GMO and Xia Danqiong entered almost at the same time. Luo Kadi was the last to enter, but at this moment, the hole had already begun to close. Second young master Luo cried out. His body had already entered, but half of his buttocks were clamped. What the fuck? Luo Kadi wanted to cry but failed to shed any tears. He fiercely tore off a piece of flesh from his buttocks, and only then was he able to free himself. He grimaced in pain, but he didn't dare to slow down at all. Second young master Luo ran as fast as he could, with blood dripping from his buttocks. This young master is too pitiful. People describe it as a coincidence, but this young master has really squeezed my butt. Second young master Luo wrinkled his face, and was about to cry. This image, damn it, it's as if I'm running for my life even though I've contracted hemorrhoids. Today, I'm wearing white clothes to show my elegance and attract the attention of a girl. My noble and upright image is completely ruined. The mountain wall had been sealed, and the inside of the cave was filled with milky white light. He ran at full speed, and as he walked, the passage behind him was sealed. The rumbling sounds were endless, and he really didn't dare to stop at all. Especially second young master Luo, who was at the back, felt that his buttocks would be clamped again at any time. He didn't even dare to look back along the way. He didn't know how far he had run, and the terrain began to descend, and he didn't know how deep it was. After a full hour, he reached a relatively wide area. The passage behind him was sealed, and no longer continued. Everyone finally let out a sigh of relief. From the looks of it, it should be sealed in the belly of a mountain that was sealed deep underground. Luo Kadi stopped his footsteps with a schwa sound. He breathed in cold air, and only now had the time to treat the wound on his buttocks. GMO heard the dripping sounds, and turned around to look. He couldn't help but cry out. Damn! Miss Luo, your period came? Why didn't you prepare any protection? In such a tense atmosphere, when GMO's words came out, everyone turned around to look, and immediately burst out laughing. Even the cold-faced Gu Duxing revealed a trace of a smile. With this guy GMO following, there was no lack of jokes at any time. Luo Kadi's face twisted, and he fiercely said, Get lost! Since there were no women here, second young master Luo directly took off all his clothes. It was really inconvenient for him to do it himself, so he stuck out his buttocks, and said to GMO, Come, apply medicine on my buttocks. GMO retched, and covered his nose. He took out some medicine. Don't fucking fart at this time. I'm coming. Suddenly, there was laughter. Luo Kadi's head was sweating from the pain, and he couldn't help but laugh until his whole body twitched. Martial Yin Yang everyone turned to look, and saw that this cave was about 100 feet wide, and the stone walls were smooth. Perhaps even a gecko wouldn't be able to stay on top of it. In the opposite direction, there were 3 passages, and they were still dark. Everyone was stunned. How could there be 3 passages? They all looked at Ao Xia Yun, and Ao Xia Yun was also at a loss. He spread out his hands, and shrugged his shoulders, indicating that he didn't want to kill a sheep. At this moment, the whole earth suddenly seemed to tremble, and a buzzing sound came from below, as if there were millions of people praying in an extremely distant place. The sound got closer and closer, and gradually, it reached them like an avalanche. Tribulation completed, the sky red, the dragon soars, dominating the sky. It was still a murmuring voice, tirelessly repeating the same words over and over again. The ground trembled, and slowly cracked. A dragon head statue slowly rose from the ground, its mouth wide open. Then, it quieted down and stood in front of Ao Xianyun. Again? Ao Xianyun blinked. How much blood do I have to release? Mo Tianji said. There's no other choice. It seems like we can only release your blood today. GMO applied medicine on Luo Kadi's buttocks as he said. It's a pity that Miss Luo's blood can't be used, otherwise you would have saved so much. Look at how much it's dripping along the way. Luo Kadi stuck out his buttocks, cursing continuously. Ao Xianyun said angrily. Even if it can be used, it's still the blood of the buttocks. How can it be the same? It's too dirty. Everyone laughed, and Luo Kadi finally stood up, gritting his teeth. He said angrily. All of you are bullying me. No one comforts me when I'm injured. GMO gave Luo Kadi's buttocks, which had just been bandaged, a slap. While Luo Kadi jumped up in pain, GMO had already said, Actually, you should be glad that you're a man. If you were a woman and spent every day with us, you would have gotten pregnant long ago. Get lost! Everyone roared together, and Mo Tianji was no exception. Ao Xianyun laughed, and at the same time, he activated the cultivation bloodline in his body. Gu Duxing mercilessly struck again, and a blood arrow shot into the dragon's mouth again. The hole on the left lit up for a moment, and then slowly closed, leaving only the one on the right open. Is this the power of the bloodline? Mo Tianji pondered. A figure flashed, and Luo Kadi had already rushed to the front. With a whoosh, he went in. This time, I want to be in front. Second young Master Luo said excitedly. Let's see who's the one who's going to get caught. Turning around, he saw the other 5 people slowly walking in with smiles on their faces. GMO said disdainfully. Idiot, this hole is not sealed. Luo Kadi was dumbfounded. He stomped his feet and thumped his chest. This time, it was relatively stable. Everyone walked in one after another. Mo Tianji said. Duxing, don't support Ao Xianyun. Let him walk in front. We'll just follow behind him. Gu Duxing agreed. Ao Xianyun had lost too much blood, and was already a little dazed. However, after drinking a few mouthfuls of water, his spirits were lifted. Xianyun, don't cover the wound on your chest. Leave it open, and let the smell of your blood spread out. Mo Tianji instructed calmly. Okay. Ao Xianyun didn't say anything else. He walked in with his wound open. Luo Kadi! You'll still be at the back. Mo Tianji ordered again. He had never been to such a place before, but based on his intuition and the word bloodline, he thought of many things. Luo Kadi walked back in confusion and asked, Why? Xia Danchong glared at him and said in a low voice, This place is activated by the power of the bloodline. You're injured. If you walk in front, the smell of your blood will cover the smell of Ao Xianyun's bloodline. Stupid, you can't even think of this? Luo Kadi was shocked. Sorry, I didn't think of it. This is also my guess. It may not be accurate. Mo Tianji said. But in the future, when you encounter such complicated and strange things, you must listen to the command. Otherwise, if you take a wrong step, all of us will be finished. Mo Tianji looked at the others with some warning. The brothers nodded. He was making use of this incident to give his brothers another psychological hint to further ensure their safety. Because Mo Tianji knew that there were too many strange places and powerful enemies in the upper 3 heavens. If they didn't make thorough preparations in the upper 3 heavens, they would only be courting death if they rushed up one day. And Ao Xieyun opening the treasure of the dragon race this time made Mo Tianji even more certain that he and his brothers would definitely be able to rush up to the upper three heavens. The awakening of the bloodline wasn't without reason. Since it existed, it would be of great use. Moreover, that murmur also accurately said, 10,000 years, the beginning of the transformation into a dragon. In particular, the words, 10,000 years, made Mo Tianji feel that there was a hint of destiny. Mo Tianji felt uncomfortable when he heard the word destiny. It was as if everything wasn't under his control. He couldn't help but think, if Chu Yang was here, what would he do? What would he think? Everyone entered in a single file. After walking for a few thousand feet, Mo Tianji finally relaxed. As he walked, he smeared a special kind of fragrance on the stone walls along the way without leaving a trace. Although he knew that this kind of awakening of the bloodline wouldn't be dangerous, Mo Tianji still instinctively started to prepare for a rainy day. The further they walked, the wider it became. The milky white fog also became thicker and thicker. Breathing in this milky white spiritual energy made one feel extremely comfortable. It was as if the cultivation in one's body was improving with every breath. There was a bend in the road ahead. A faint red light shone through. Everyone quickened their pace and walked over. The moment they turned the bend, the brothers couldn't help but be stunned. Right in front of them was a large milky white space. It was at least a few thousand feet wide. It was simply inconceivable that there was such a large space underground. In the center of this space, there was a huge golden dragon lying there silently. A pair of eyes emitted a blood-red light as it looked at everyone. In 2 years, it's the first time I've charged up the monthly votes list. I hope everyone will support me. I hope this month can be like this, soaring proudly, soaring through the sky. But I don't need 10,000 years. This time is enough. If it's 10,000 years, I reckon I'll have reincarnated to become the master of the Calamity Sword. I woke up at 3 in the morning. I've only written 2 chapters until now. I'll change the 2nd chapter and send it out later. Requesting monthly votes. Chapter 951. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. The dragon was more than 10 feet long. Its body was soft and gentle, but it had a natural aura of elegance and power. Martial yin yang. When everyone saw it, they felt a wave of shock in their hearts. They did not even dare to breathe. It was a natural dragon's aura. After a moment of silence, they realized that the dragon was not moving at all. Although its eyes were shining, it was definitely not a living creature. There were a few antique shelves around it, covered in a layer of white fog. After wiping them, they realized that these shelves were made of purple crystal. On them, there were secret manuals made of beast skin, sabers, swords, fists, and legs. Basically, all the weapons one could think of were here. Then, there was a single shelf. On it, there was a big book made of purple crystal and a shining pearl. In this milky white land of spiritual energy, this pearl was like a star. After 10,000 years, it still did not change its color. Divine Dragon Secret Manual. Those who do not have the dragon bloodline cannot learn it. On the purple crystal shelf, there was a line of words. On the stone wall opposite, there were a few lines of words. The Divine Dragon clan originated from the east of the firmament. It has been a long time, and no one can verify it. Today, the heavens have collapsed. With the power of the dragon ancestor, this place was established. Descendants of the future, do not be idle. The original power of the firmament is here. 1 Dragon Pearl. The firmament's divine essence, countless secret manuals. If you do not succeed, do not leave this place. Descendants of the inherited bloodline need to remember that if one day you can travel the firmament, you can go to the east and fulfill the regret of the dragon clan for hundreds of thousands of years. It was a very simple and clear sentence. It was half a sentence and half a sentence. It also showed that the level of the divine dragon lord who left these words was only passable. Ao Xieyun only felt his heart wavering. He could not help but walk forward, wanting to take the Divine Dragon's secret manual. Just as his palm touched the Divine Dragon's secret tome, the pearl beside it suddenly shone brightly. Then, it slowly flew up and soared into the air. Then, it flew one round around Ao Xian, as if it was confirming something. Finally, it turned into a ray of light and drilled into Ao Xian's bleeding chest wound, disappearing from sight. Ao Xian only felt a sudden dizziness in his head. He was in a daze. He seemed to have understood something, and also seemed to have come into contact with something. However, everything was illusory and unfathomable. Yet after a long while, he finally regained his senses. He saw that his 5 brothers were standing in front of him, looking at him with concern. Ao Xian's heart warmed. "I'm fine. This is a Dragon Ball. It has fused with my bloodline." "So that's how it is." Amo Tianji smiled in relief. "Xie Yun, congratulations. Looks like you're really going to transform into a dragon." Ao Xian smiled and nodded. GMO suddenly interrupted. He worriedly said, "What should we do then?" "I say, old Ao Xian, if you really transform into a dragon, of course your body will have to become bigger. Correspondingly, that thing will also have to become bigger. There is really no one who can stand you. In this world, where can we find a female dragon for you?" Hearing this, everyone was petrified on the spot. They didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They really didn't understand how this guy's brain worked. Every time he looked at a problem, he could always think of this aspect that made them not know whether to laugh or cry. Ao Xian's face was distorted as he said, "You don't have to worry about this." Suddenly, he said angrily, "GMO, you're meddling in too many things." Mo Tianji looked at GMO with disappointment and helplessness. "You idiot, he only has the bloodline of the dragon race. It's not like he's directly a dragon. He's still like this normally. Why can't he do it?" GMO scratched his head. He was a little embarrassed and said, "I just felt a little emotional when I saw this dragon. According to this ratio, if Ao Xian really does that thing, it will have to be at least this thick." As he spoke, he stretched out his hand and gestured, circling a space as thick as a person's calf. Then, he shook his head and said, "No, it has to be at least as thick as Luo Kudi's head, fuck you." Luo Kudi immediately pounced on him in anger. The two of them immediately wrestled. The others looked at these two buffoons helplessly. They really didn't know what to say. "When we go back, I'll tell Alba about your past affairs." Luo Kudi's face was black with anger. "GMO, just you wait." "Sir." "You're my dear sir." GMO screamed and rushed forward to apologize. He cried miserably, "Look at my thin arms and legs. That big sister can send me flying with one slap. I'm already in deep water and suffering. Don't add insult to injury." As he said this, he actually smiled wretchedly. "But fortunately, I had the foresight to find the boss and get the medicine. Now I'm also very powerful, ha ha." Everyone shook their heads and sighed. They couldn't do anything about this buffoon. Mo Tianji had heard GMO talk about this huge dragon, so he paid attention to it. He walked over to take a look. Ao Xiayun also went over. Even though GMO was talking nonsense, Ao Xiayun still secretly glanced at the huge dragon's crotch. Then, he suddenly opened his mouth wide. He lowered his head to look at his own crotch, and shook his head repeatedly. The corner of Mo Tianji's mouth secretly twitched. He whispered, "Are you ashamed of your inferiority?" Ao Xian's face was red. He said angrily, "Tianji, you're also making a fuss." I'm really. During this period of time, the brothers were together every day. They didn't have any taboos when they talked. Ao Xian smiled bitterly and changed the topic. "Legend has it that there should be a hidden treasure of a Calamity Sword Master here. Why haven't I seen it?" Mo Tianji shook his head. "This should be a rumor. This place existed when the world was destroyed. At that time, even the first Calamity Sword Master hadn't appeared yet. How could there be a hidden treasure of a Calamity Sword Master here?" Ao Xian laughed. I'm a little greedy. Mo Tianji also laughed. He approached the dragon, stretched out his finger, and tapped on the dragon's body, saying, "This thing doesn't look like a real dragon. But this material is really strange. It actually seems a little warm." The two circled around the dragon and finally found words on the other side. Heavenly origin energy of heaven and earth. Consume divine essence first, then absorb origin energy. If you can't absorb it, don't leave this place. The two of them sucked in a breath of cold air. This enormous dragon was actually an entire piece of heavenly source energy. And from the meaning of these words, they couldn't leave until they finished absorbing it. How long would it take to absorb it? Even if they worked together, they probably wouldn't be able to absorb it in a short period of time. At the very least, it might take a year. If they were slow, it would take him 8 to 10 years. Below this line of words, there were neatly arranged pieces of shiny things that looked like stars. Mo Tianji reached out and picked one up. It felt warm and soft to the touch. At the same time, he felt a strong desire in his stomach. It was as if he desperately wanted to eat this thing. Before he could resist, this thing had already flown into Mo Tianji's mouth. It melted in his mouth and turned into a warm current, entering his meridians. At the same time, 5 of the other 8 pieces of heavenly origin energy flew up from the dragon's body and entered the mouths of Ao Xianyun, Gu Duxing, Xia Danqiong, GMO, and Luo Kudi respectively. Then, the milky white fog in the entire space suddenly thickened. Milky white spiritual energy slowly spewed out from the dragon's mouth, filling the entire space. So this pure spiritual energy of heaven and earth is produced by this dragon, no, this piece of heavenly origin energy. As long as these heavenly origin energy are taken out from here, the heavenly origin energy will evaporate faster. What an exquisite design! Mo Tianji exclaimed. Gu Duxing stepped forward and said in a deep voice, "This is a rare treasure. It's also a rare blessing. It's a pity that Big Brother, Wu Shang, and Butong aren't here. Otherwise, it would be great if we could absorb it and cultivate together." At the mention of Chu Yang, everyone fell silent. Their moods instantly became very heavy. Until now, there had been no news of Chu Yang. After a long time, Mo Tianji took a deep breath and said, "Don't worry, everyone. It's useless to think about anything now. We can only do our own things now. If Chu Yang isn't dead, he will definitely meet up with us." GMO, who had been laughing all this time, was silent at this moment. Suddenly, he asked, "But at that time, will the Heavenly Armament Pavilion still be the Heavenly Armament Pavilion?" When this sentence came out, the atmosphere immediately became heavy. Mo Tianji took a deep breath and solemnly raised his hand. "I swear that the Heavenly Armament Pavilion will still be the Heavenly Armament Pavilion at that time." He put down his hand with a bitter smile and said lightly, "I know that you've always been worried about this, but I promised Chu Yang that I would accompany him to dance with the wind and clouds in the sky. To be free and unrestrained in the world together, to be proud and wild together," he said heavily. "Chu Yang isn't here now, but we are. The Heavenly Armament Pavilion is still here. So I'll do my part for him. If Chu Yang is still alive, there will be a day when we stand side by side in the heavens. If Chu Yang is dead, the Heavenly Armament Pavilion will immediately disband. Don't think that I've been controlling you all this time. In fact, I can't do anything. In this world, besides Chu Yang, there is no one else who can control you." Ji Mo's expression softened. He rubbed his nose and said embarrassedly, "I'm sorry." Mo Tianji patted his shoulder and smiled understandingly. "I can understand you. It's a good thing that you value your brothers. Why would I blame you?" he said lightly. "In the past, I only wanted to be free and unrestrained. I wanted to control the world in the palm of my hand. I wanted to move the wind and clouds with a wave of my hand. That was my life's ambition. But now that I think about it, although that was glorious, it was also lonely. I only understood it when I met you all." Mo Tianji smiled warmly. His eyes shone with sincerity. He said slowly, "Only with brothers can one be happy. Only with brothers can one be happy. The other 5 people silently repeated this sentence. Their eyes shone. If you don't experience things together, if you don't go through life and death together, if you don't go through hardships together, you will never understand what kind of feelings are contained in this word. And understanding. Because you have brothers, your heart will no longer be lonely and wandering. You won't always look at people with distrust. You won't feel lonely and your heart will be at peace. Because I know that even if the whole world is against me, I won't be lonely. Mo Tianji was silent for a long time. Then, he said, after we absorb all of this, there won't be many people in this world who can do anything to us. There's one thing I can tell you. Gu Duxing frowned and asked, what is it? Mo Tianji said solemnly, everyone here is my brother. Don't let anyone else know about this. The 5 of them looked at each other. They didn't know what he was going to say. Mo Tianji's eyes shone brightly. He said word by word, the reason why I firmly believe that Chu Yang is not dead is because Chu Yang is very likely to be the Tribulation Sword Master who came out to face this tribulation. Add 400 more words to this chapter. Many people don't like me describing my brothers, so I can only add more words to the extra words. And Mo Tianji's understanding this time is also what I have been understanding these few days. I am not lonely because I have all of you. I am not fighting alone because I have all of you with me. These few days, all of you have given me too much warmth and touched me. Just as Mo Tianji said, only with brothers can one be happy. That's why I wrote some of my own things at the end of the chapter, including ugly things and happy things. Because I want to share all of my emotions with all of you. I want all of you to smile because of me. Even if it's my embarrassing things. I'm very happy to be able to exchange for your smiles. Because I've finally brought you some joy. Many people don't like what I wrote, but I can't help it. Haha. I once said that if you read one of my books, including the nonsense at the end of my chapters, I'll make you feel that I'm real in front of you. I care about all of you. Thank you. These few days, I'm very touched and satisfied. You're tuning into the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.